Okay, let's be real. AI is literally taking over the world. I mean, it can literally write your code in seconds, right? So why bother even learning to code yourself? Here's the thing. If you just let AI do everything, you will never fully understand what's happening under the hood. And if you want to stay ahead, you need to know the fundamentals. That's where this series comes in. So we're gonna learn Express.js from this series from scratch. Not just because AI cannot write it, it can obviously, but because you need to know how it works to actually control it, debug it, and build things that matter. So let's get started. Now, before we dive into coding with Express.js, we need the actual environment ready for Express, right? That means installing Node.js, NPM, and Express, the tools that we need to make JavaScript run in our computer. So for this, we'll be covering for 3 different operating systems, which is the most widely used operating system throughout the world. That is obviously Windows, Mac, and Linux. So for now, I'll teach you for Windows, and since I am in Windows. So for that, you can just go to Node.js.org. That is the official website for Node.js. And you can come to the download nav section right here. And after this, you can just download the Windows installer. Just like that, and you can save the installer. Right? Now after that, you can open the Node installer. Now before we do this, there are a couple of different choices for the installation. You can install it for Windows, Mac, or even Linux. And for different distros of Linux, let's say you're using Debian, Arch, or even Fedora, I will leave the commands on the screen right now, or even down in the description box below. So for Windows, I'm just gonna open the installer that we downloaded. Now you can click on next, and after that you can just pretend that you read the Node.js license agreement and just accept the license agreement, and just click on next, and you can install it wherever you want. I'm just gonna leave it wherever it wants to be by default, and just hit next one more time. Now here you can either check it if you want it, if you want Chocolate installed. Now in our case, we just care about Express, so we are just gonna keep it unchecked and hit next. And after that is the last button, hit install. It will ask for the admin privileges for that. I'm just gonna give it that, and it will start installing Node.js in our computer. I'm just gonna speed this up. There we go. So after this, Node.js will be successfully installed in our computer system. Now you can check it by opening the CMD. Now you can just open run, type CMD. Now it will open the command prompt. After this, you can just do node-v. This will give you the version of the node that we installed from the installer. If we click that, there we go. Now after this, it should give you the version of a node, a specific version of the node. Now it will differ if you're watching this now or in the future, because the packages will be updated, and you might get a different version. So unless you don't see a version, you're good. Same goes with npm. You can just do npm-v. It will also give you a version of the npm that you installed. Now in some Linux distros, if you forgot to install npm, and if you do this, and if it says it does not exist, you still need to separately install npm. Okay, so I'm just gonna leave the commands for Linux distros down in the description box below. It will only be for Debian, Fedora, and Arch, which is the 3 main most popular Linux distributions. So now that we have installed Node.js into our computer system, now what we can do is actually set up our project. So here I have made a folder saying Express.js episode 1 and just make like first episode. Here is where we will, set up our code and start using our Express.js. What we need to do is I'm going to right click or shift right click, or you can just right click, show more options, and open with code, right? this will basically open the folder with VS Code. Now, again, I'm using VS Code. You can use whatever code editor you want. I recommend VS Code because it has extensions and other stuff, and it is most widely used code editor in the world and preferred by most of the programmers worldwide. So here what I can do is I have made a folder called first episode, as you can see. So here I can basically start, building my application. So first we have to install Express. Now we haven't installed Express. We just installed Node, and Express, as I said in the intro, is a framework on top of Node. So here I can just click on this 3 dots here, go to terminal, saying open new terminal. Now this will open my terminal, right? Now what I can do here is just, first I can just do npm init-y. Now, if you encounter this problem, that just means your PowerShell script execution policy is blocking npm from running. Now, this is a very common problem in Windows when Node.js is installed, but PowerShell does not allow this script execution. Now, here's easy way to fix it. Again, it's only for Windows, okay? If you're using Mac or Linux, you will likely not encounter this problem unless you did something wrong installing Node.js. Okay, so to fix this, we can just type set execution policy, right? And dash space dash scope process execution policy bypass. Now you can type this, and this will bypass the actual execution policy of PowerShell. Now, if you're just, lazy like me and you don't want to type this long command, it will be down in the description box below. So, kind of making it easier for you. So after that, we can just redo the command, sorry. We can do npm init dash space dash y. Now with that, it should start working. As you can see, the package.json is installed. Now this is what the npm init installs. Now what is package.json? It is a very special file that lives under the root of Node.js. Now when you do npm init y, as you can see right here that we did it, it will basically download a package.json file. It basically says what's the name of the folder. As you can see, it says first episode, what version you're using. If you installed any other dependencies later down the line, it will be all over here. You can basically also, put scripts saying like test or other stuff like this. And yeah, for now, just understand that this is a special file that you just need, because I cannot explain it right now because we'll explain it slowly, but you will probably understand it while we go on with the series. Okay, so after this, we have successfully, initialized our project. Now we still haven't installed Express. Okay, we are still on to that. So what we need to do is, after you install, or after doing npm init-y, what we need to do is basically do npm install express. Now to do it, what we can do is just type npm install express. So now we are finally installing Express into our folder. So you have to do this every single time you make a project folder of Express. Now if you're wondering, do I have to do this every time I'm making a new folder or you're starting a new project? The answer to that is yes, unfortunately. Because you need Express framework, you have to install Express framework from npm, which again stands for Node Package Manager, to actually start your Express. But that is only when you are actually starting out a new project folder, which normally and typically you would not do, because you'll probably do everything here anyways. So yeah. And if you have to set up a new project anyways, it basically takes less than a minute, because you only have to make sure you remember these 2 commands. And there we go. So let's go ahead and make the new file. So make sure you do make the file outside all of these folders. So here I'm gonna make a new file. As you can see, it's outside the Node modules folder. Come down here and just make server.js. Again, you can name it whatever you want. As I said, it doesn't have to be server.js, but you know, ideally just follow along. So that is it. So after that, I can just minimize it by clicking on the Explorer type. Now after this, what I can do is start writing our Express code. So what do we write here to, you know, make it work? So first, as you can see, you have to understand that we are actually writing Express code. So as I said, you basically downloaded all of the dependencies inside the Node modules folder. So what I need to do is basically import Express first. Now the syntax to do that is make a variable first. Let's say I'll just name it variable Express, since this is the, you know, we are basically importing the Express module. Now I'll just do equals to and do require. So this is the syntax when you're importing anything, not just Express. So here we'll give whatever thing we are importing inside the require function here. So here what I can do is just do Express. Now this will basically import Express for us, right? Now here I need to use this Express import, right? Now to do that, I can just do const app equals to Express, just like that. Now this will basically set up a Express web application for us, and we can use that by using the app variable as that. So app right here is basically a special object created by Express, which represents all the entire web application of Express, right? So we can use app, which is the variable. So we can use app right here to basically, you know, do whatever we want later down the line. We can declare routes, add middleware, and, you know, even start our server. Okay, now as our very first thing, what we'll do is basically set up a get route in order for our server to respond when somebody visits our homepage. Now what I'm going to do here is use our existing app object that we made that represents our Express app web application, right? What I can do is just do app, use the variable, and do dot get. So this function will basically trigger a get request if someone does something, but we have to define that. So I'm just gonna say that this get request is for someone who visits our homepage. Now homepage is our landing page. We can just basically represent by a single slash, and this will basically represent our homepage. Now what we can do is basically put a comma here. This is part of a syntax, by the way, and we can set up another function to this parameter. So this will basically be a callback function that will basically trigger when somebody enters our homepage. Now we need two parameters here. One is request, next is response, right? We can just say that it is RQ and RES. Basically means request and response. Now we need a callback function, so you can basically make callback function just like this. Now if somebody visits our homepage, now we have to write some logic to that, right? We can basically say that if somebody visits our homepage, we can just do response, use the response, right? We'll send the client response saying response.send will send a message of hello world. Okay, so it'll basically say a text hello world, that we have basically made a route for our homepage. But we haven't basically set up our server, like where is the server running exactly, right? Okay, so that is our code. But I'm just gonna explain it one more time in case any of you guys didn't get it. So whenever a person visits our website, specifically the homepage, right, we'll basically say hello world. That's pretty much it, right? Let's say the user visits about, we can give a different saying, hello, this is about page. Now we'll just leave it for now, but what we haven't done, we don't have anything to actually start our server. Now to start our server, what we can do is do app.listen. Now this will basically start our server. We can specify which port to start it on. Let's say that is 3000, and run a callback function. like the output right here. Now in this is basically the starting of the server, so we don't need any kind of request and response, right? So here what I can do is just do console.log, and we can say the server is running on, let's say I will give it the actual, link. So here I can just do https, not s, http, and just say localhost 3000. Since we started the port as 3000 and our, link is localhost, we can basically do that. Now, that is everything to just get started with Express. Now we can run our server. Now to do that, we can just go to our terminal right here, right? Make sure you are on the first episode folder, as you can see right here. Otherwise, it won't work. So after this, I can just say node server.js. Since server.js is where we set up our server, we can just start the server by that. Hit enter. You'll see server is running on localhost 3000. That is the console.log. That is the log that we did here when we start the server. That means the server is running. Now, to check if the server is running, what we can do is come to our browser, right? Come to our browser and basically copy the link right here. We can also control click, but I won't be doing that since it will just be better if I just paste it right here. Now, as you can see, I'm basically going to the localhost 3000 port. If you go that, as you can see, the hello world that we printed or the server is sending works perfectly. Right? Now, I'm just gonna zoom in for you guys in case you can't see. Now, this was a text. You can also send JSON data. Usually it's JSON data because it's backend server. Now, to send a JSON response, what I can do is instead of doing .send, I can just do response.json, right? And give a JavaScript object. Now, when sending it, it will basically parse it into JSON, right? I can just do name, and let's say name is Codynn. Make sure you type it inside the quotes here, right? Actually use double quotes. And next is the, let's say just I'll give a message saying message, let's say is subscribe to the channel, by the way. Quick little set out there. So after this, what I can do is we can go to our terminal here. After this, we can go back to our browser. So I accidentally cut it earlier, so I'm just gonna open a brand new browser and just give it that. As you can see, the JSON response is right there, right? It is sending our JSON response, and yeah, you can also catch it by a front-end code. Let's say you set up in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and try fetching this link. Now that is for you to do. So that's it for today's video, guys. If you like the first episode of our brand new series of Express, then hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And with that said, I'll see you guys in the episode 2. Until then, bye-bye. Routes are one of the most important parts of any web application. They define how your server responds to different URLs. In this episode, we'll learn how to handle multiple paths, send different responses, and even create a 404 page for unknown URLs. By end of this video, your app will know exactly what to do for every URL, just like a real website. And with that said, let's get started. Alright, so what exactly is a route? So to actually explain it, I'm going to give you a real life analogy to have a better understanding of what is a route. Okay, think of your Express app, which, that we defined, which is the app. Just understand it as a restaurant. So let's say you are someone who is visiting into a restaurant to just eat a pizza. You sit on the table and the waiter comes to take your order. Now, here's the thing. So you say, I would like a pizza. The waiter writes your order and tells to the chef. After the pizza is done, the waiter actually delivers you to your table and you eat your pizza. Now here, if someone says, I want a pizza or I want a pasta, the waiter brings it accordingly. The waiter does not give pizza to the customer that ordered pasta, right? That is exactly how routes work. When a user visits a specific URL path, which I've written right here in the definition of route, and a HTTP method, The route is basically the thing that is defined in the backend to respond accordingly to the user. Now let's say, for example, you go to youtube.com. I misspelled it. youtube.com/shorts. Now, shorts right here is a path, right? So when you visit this website, the backend responds with a shorts video, or the YouTube shorts, right? YouTube shorts. Now that is basically the route. In the last video, we only saw routes for the homepage, which is only one backslash. Now in this video, we'll be looking into different kind of routes, and we'll understand the concept of routes even better, because it's one of the most important concepts in Express. Now let's move into the concept or formula of routes, right? Now here I have the formula with me here. So the formula for writing a route is the app, which is again, app basically represents your Express web server. You can basically do it by writing const app equals to Express, right? This is basically your app, which represents your Express web server. Here, this is the web server that I was talking about. The method can be any HTTP method, right? Method can be any HTTP method. It can be either get, post, put, or delete. Now, the last one is the handler. Now, handler basically means the function or the callback function that basically defines what happens when the user visits. Now, it can be anything. Like it can be, let's say, the backend sends a JSON data to front end. This is usually what happens. It can be, let's say, it says hello world. It can be anything that is for you to decide what happens when user actually visits that specific URL path with that specific HTTP method. Now this is something that we'll be learning in today's video. So let's move on to computer screen and actually make routes and have an even better and clear understanding of routes. So here I'm in the computer screen, and now I have made a new folder called second episode. Since this is our second episode, you can hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And with that said, let's get into the video. Now here, what I'm going to do here is I have to install Express like last episode because I haven't done in this folder. To do that, I can just go to the terminal. Now here I can just do npm init -y. Now this is something I taught you in the last episode. If you haven't checked that out, link will be in the video description. Here this will give me a package.json file, which will basically consist of what is our folder name, which is the scripts and everything, right? Now here I need to install Express now, so I'm just going to do npm install and Express. So this is, I'm just fast forwarding really fast because I've already taught all of this in the last episode. Now here, this will give me the node modules file that will have everything about Express. And now I need to make a new file. I'm going to come out of Node.js, node modules, and do server.js. So this is the file where we will write our Express code. Now in the last video, I taught you step by step on every single thing that you have to write to start a server. Now I'm not going to do that here. So here I'm just going to use the shortcut using Express, and that will write it for me. Now you might be thinking, oh, that doesn't do for me, right? Now this is an extension, or it's just an Express snippet that I installed from the extensions tool. You can just search, go to the extensions here, just search Express snippet, and I downloaded this one. So you can also go with the flow. You can also choose whichever you want, but it will have different commands on which extension you actually use. If you cannot find this extension in the VS Code extension tab, then it will also be linked in the video description. So yeah, after this, what I'm going to do, so I'm going to cut few things here that I haven't taught, like this one right here. I haven't taught you the HTTP methods yet, so I'm just going to close that. I'm also going to cut this because it's the middleware. I haven't taught you middleware too. And with that said, we should be at the last episode's code. So this is something that I wrote and I taught you in the last episode. Now here, moving on to route, this is our first route, right? I'm just going to comment that. So this is our first route. And you might be thinking, we made routes in the last episode. Yes, we did. But I didn't say it were routes because you wouldn't understand, right? So in this video, we'll be understanding routes even better. So here, again, app is our Express web server, just like here. Get is our HTTP methods. There are multiple HTTP methods. Some of them are get, post, put, delete, or patch, just like that. We'll learn all of these in upcoming videos when we will actually learn HTTP methods. So next is this. This is what we call a path. So when somebody visits our home page, this / represents the home page of web server. Now, if somebody visits our home page, this will return hello world to them. Now, how do you verify this? I'm just going to run the server. I'm just going to do node server.js here. I'm just going to copy this and open this from a web server. So I'm just going to do that. And this will return me a hello world just like that. As you can see, this is localhost 3000, the same port right here. Now what I need to do is I'm just going to close the server for now. So what I can do is change the route to different things or even define multiple routes. So this is one route for the home page. I'm going to define another route. So I'm just going to copy paste. You can do Control C and Control V on any line and it will paste it for you in the right next line. So here I can define another route for, let's say, the path to that route will be about, right? So this is for about page. So that's / about. And this will basically send, let's say, this is our about page. So when somebody visits our about page, this will return, this is our about page. So let's just quickly verify that. I'm just going to open my browser and also start my server again because we have to start the server every single time. After that, the server is start. Now I'm going to open the thing. I'm going to paste, oh, I pasted the wrong thing. Oops. And just paste that there. And this will basically say hello world. Now this says hello world, even though we defined the route for this is our route page. That's because we haven't actually went to about page. This is our home page, right? Now I'm just gonna add about here, just like that, which is the route right here, right? When you click on here, this will basically give you, this is our about page, and there we go. So this is how you define routes, right? Now this is our path, this is our handler. Handler is a callback function that has all of the logic for what the backend should do when the user actually hits that route, right? So everything right here makes a route. But you need to understand what happens when a user visits a route. So here, let's make another route. I can also, again, copy paste that. Let's change that to contact page and just say this is our contact page, right? Just like that. Now I need to restart this server one more time. I'm just going to go here, close that. I'm just hit Control C. That will stop the server and do node server.js. And I'm gonna now server restarted. Let's go to contact page and this will say this is our contact page. Now here we have defined 3 routes, right? Now you might be thinking, what happens if a user visits a route that does not exist? You know what? Let's test it. Here what I'm going to do is visit a route called services. Now this does not exist, so backend returns saying cannot get /services. That makes sense. That is because the services route does not exist in our web server. Now, how to handle this edge case, right? What if user visits a route that does not exist? In such cases, what we can do is define a page not found page. Now, what is that? Let's have a look. To make a page not found route, what we need to do is basically use the use method. Now, what is use? If I do app.use, this will basically run regardless of the path. Okay, let's say in these cases, right? If the user hits the home page, it would run hello world. If user hits the about page, it will run this is our about page. Like it will basically send the data of this is our about page to the user, right? Now, this app.use will run regardless of the HTTP method and the path. So that's why we don't need to give a specific HTTP method. We just use. This will basically run regardless of the HTTP method. Now, in this case, we are making one for a page not found. So what I need to do is still pass our callback function, which is our route handler. What I need to do is make two parameters that are request and response. That is standard at this point. And here I can just do response. If user finds a route that does not exist, if the route here is defined, that means user visits a route that exists, it will just show them that page. Now, what if the server cannot find the route for the user that the user is looking for? Now, we'll just catch that from this route handler and just do response dot status. Let's say the status code is 404. That means page not found. And just do send. We'll just send a message saying page not found. Now, if you do this, and we'll hit save, and I'm just gonna go to our terminal, and here I'm just gonna restart the server really quick. I can just do node server.js. This will start our server, and we'll just copy that server. I'm just gonna open it right here. Now, by default, in our homepage, that will show a hello world. If I just go to our about, it will show our about page, right? What if we visit a route that does not exist? Let's say settings. This is a route that does not exist. It will just say page not found. So this is how you handle a route that the backend does not have. It will just say page not found, or you can just get creative and put whatever you want, right? And that is it for today's video, guys. I hope the concept of routes is crystal clear in your mind now. If it is, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys in the third episode of Express.js. Till then, bye-bye. In the last video, we learned about routes, how our server responds to different URLs. But between the request coming in and response going out, there's something really important happening: middlewares. In this video, we'll see what is middlewares, how it works, and why it's a key part of every Express app. With that said, let's get started. So, what exactly is a middleware? So, middleware is just a function. I wrote the definition here if you are interested. Middleware is just a function that runs between request and the response. So, in the last video where we learned routes, we thought that when somebody makes a request, it basically goes directly to your route where the route handler is. So let's say it should look like something like app.get. You have something path, like / something path. I'm just gonna write it a little bit neatly here. Let's say it goes to homepage, and let's say your request handler, right? It goes directly to your request handler and basically sends some sort of response. So that is how we understood routes, or how an actual response is sent. Now, this is not something that happens usually. After a request is made by the client, right, it first goes through multiple middlewares. So a middleware is a function that can be written by the user. It can also be built in, and also many more. So I'm just gonna explain it, every single one of them, in today's video, so don't worry. For now, just understand a middleware is a function that runs between request and response. That's it, okay? And after the middleware is run, it goes through the route handler, and then it sends some kind of response, right? Now, we have learned that, okay, there is a thing called middleware that basically is a function that runs between request and response. But why do so exactly? Is it that important? You said it is, and it is, right? But why is it so important? See, middleware, if you use it well, it can be useful in multiple scenarios. Let's say that a user basically sends a request, right? Now, as a backend, let's say I want to log that response on a given time. Let's say I want to know that what time that request actually came from the client. Let's say it is, I don't know, 11:40 a.m. or what kind of response that was. Let's say user sent a GET request, right? I want to know all of these. I can just basically pass these from the middlewares and just pass the middleware to the route handler, right? And then give the dedicated response that actually user wants, just like that. So not only this, it can be used for authentication. Let's say user needs to be authenticated, if like anything like two-factor or everything like that. You can also put that into middlewares, right? You can just understand middlewares like airport security. I think that's like the closest imitation of a middleware. Basically, like you check in an airport, let's say before you reach your actual gate, your bags passes through different checks, right? Scanning, boarding pass check, etc. Each check can stop you or let you continue, right? That is exactly what middlewares do. And another important thing is middlewares can also modify the request and the response. Let's say that I'm gonna erase this. I'm gonna be back. So let's say user sends a request. So that is a request, right? Let's say user sends a request and user hits the API that basically says hello world. Now, in a normal scenario, if you don't have any middlewares, it'll basically send a response called hello world. Now, if you write a middleware in between, so I'm just going to erase this, right? And let's say we have a middleware. Let's say I'm just going to do middleware and just like that. So if the middleware basically sends the response of, let's say, hello Mike or whatever, it will send the hello Mike as a response, actually stopping this to get to the another route, which is the actual route that says hello world. So instead of giving hello world, right, it will send hello Mike. So you can basically modify request and response according to your need. Let's say a good example of this is basically when you're authenticating. Let's say the user actually failed to authenticate themselves. So you can basically send the error code instead of actually giving the proper response. So this is one of the actually key use and why middlewares are so important in Express. Now actually let's write some middlewares and we'll show you how middlewares actually work, right? Let's go into the computer screen. So we have come to our VS Code. Now I'm just going to set up the project first like I do in every single one of my episodes. And I've basically named the folder third episode since it's literally our third episode. So here what I'm going to do is just do npm init-y like we do normally. And it will do its thing, give me a package.json. I've basically explained this in the first episode. If you haven't checked that out, link will be in the video description as always. So next I'm just going to do npm i express. You can also type install. You can just do npm i, basically the same thing. So after all of that, I'm going to come to our main structure here and make server.js as normal. And here I'm just going to do express, right? Here I'm gonna remove few stuff like this post request. Now this is right here is a middleware, but I'm not gonna get into this too deep. I'm just gonna cut it for now because we're just starting, right? So this is our hello world code. This is our base code that we need to set up a server. So I'm just gonna go to our terminal and I'm just gonna do I can actually put here and just do node server.js. After doing all that, it will say example app listening at localhost 3000. I can copy that link and I can open my browser here and paste that link. That will basically say hello world. Now, this is something we basically know from the past two episodes. Now, this is our basic server. Now, I'm going to make few routes here, right? We have made routes already in previous episodes. I'm just going to make a quick route here. Let's say I'm going to make a route called about, and that will basically say hello about, right? I'm going to come to our server here. I need to restart the server, right? So I'm just going to do Control C. That will close the server. I'm going to use the up arrow. I'm going to start the server just like that. And after this, I'm just going to come back down here. So our server is restarted. So I can just go to /about and I will say hello about. So that is the recap of the second episode. Now let's come to middlewares. So how to make a middleware. So here I'm going to make our first middleware saying app. We are using our web server object and just do dot, we'll do use. So when you're making middlewares, we normally just use the use method. The reason why we do that is because use method can be literally be used for every single HTTP method. Let's say the client is sending some sort of request. So if we do a specific HTTP method that will just say get or post or put or delete, whatever, it'll basically give on one of these routes. But for middleware, since it basically needs to be run for every single request and or response, we'll basically just use method since we have to run it for every single one of our HTTP methods. So inside this, what I'm going to do is pass a request and response object. Now, we have done this in the previous episodes too. And here what I'm going to do is also give another saying next. Okay, so what is next? Don't worry, I'm gonna explain it in a bit. Don't worry. And I'm just gonna run a handler, right? This is a function that will basically run for every single one of our HTTP method, basically, again, acting as a middleware. So here I'm just gonna do console.log, and we'll just do, let's say, request.method. So this will basically say what kind of method is the request. Is it a get method? Is it post method? What is it, right? And just do put another saying request.url. It will basically give the URL from the actual request is coming from. And basically do next. So what is this next function and what is the next parameter? I'm just gonna explain it in a bit. Now for now, just understand that when a client hits our server, it will go first through the middleware and go to our respective routes. Now, if I just come up here, that is our code. I'm just gonna zoom in for one more time so you guys can actually see it. Now here, what I'm gonna do is install another package because as you notice, every time you actually make changes, you have to restart the server. Now that is kind of can be a headache. Now to solve this, what I'm going to do is go to our terminal, right? And I'm going to install a package. That is, we'll do npm install -g and do nodemon. So this is basically a package that basically refreshes the actual server every time you make some changes. So now, instead of doing node server.js, we'll do nodemon, since we installed nodemon, do nodemon server.js, right? Now, it will basically say the same thing, but since it will be different than our usual, I'm just gonna actually put this onto a new tab, so it doesn't block the code. Now, every time we make changes, as we know, we set up the middleware here, right? What this will do, I'm just gonna bring my browser here and oops, I'm just gonna open our server. And now if we go here, it will say get slash. Now get is the request method and our request URL is slash. Since it's a home page, if you go to about page, it will say hello about. And if you go here, right? If you go here, it will basically say get about. So I'm just gonna actually do this. So since it's easier, right? We'll say get about. Let's say we go back to our home page, it will say /get. So this is basically kind of a logging. I want to know when the user logs in. We can also do something like if I want to know the time, I can just do date dot now. If you do that, that will give me the date. If I save this, it will restart the server. Since I made the changes, it automatically restarted the server. And if I try to log in, it will also give me the date. Now this is on Unix form. You can change it, pretty simple. You know how to do it. So I'm just gonna leave it up to you, right? Now that is middleware. So we kind of understood what's middleware, right? But we didn't understand the next thing. Why is there a next? You might be thinking, I know request and response, okay, it's basically the object that used to get the request or the response. I get it, okay? So what is next then? Now, next is a callback function that basically the Express passes into the actual middleware. So let's say if there are multiple middlewares, so this is first middleware, and this is second middleware, okay? So I'm just gonna say this, let's say authenticated or something like that. If I do that, save that, that will restart the server. Now what I'm going to do is basically call this thing. I'm just going to go here, and let's say we go to about. If you guys can actually see it, I'm just going to go to about. It'll basically say this. It will basically first go to our first middleware, then second middleware, and give us our output. Now, if we don't do it, that means if we entirely cut, or let's say just comment out the next function, right? Next callback function. I'm also gonna comment this part out. So if I do that, as you can see, it will just get stuck. So there is nothing. It will just get stuck, just like that. It will send the request, and there we go. It's stuck. There will be no response from the backend. It will just get stuck at this state. So that's why next is very important. Now, immediately if I add next, so what is happening here is it is coming to this middleware, it's getting the request, it is logging this console.log that we did. So it is indeed actually logging in, but it doesn't know what to do next because we don't have a next callback function here. So the Express doesn't know where to go. Do I go to the next middleware? Do I go to the app dot whatever the route called, like user called for? What do I do? The Express just doesn't know. So next is very, very important, right? If I just put a next here, and if I don't put next here, what will happen if we're just gonna save this, it will start the server again. It will still get stuck because after this middleware, the Express doesn't know where to go, right? So when you're making a middleware, make sure you pass your next your next callback function, right? And so to solve this, I'm just gonna uncomment that, save that, and here I'm gonna start the server. There we go. I'm just gonna put that here. Still commented, oops. And here I'm just gonna go to our server, that is localhost 3000. Right again, just like that, and this will just work perfectly. If I go to another route, let's say about, there we go. It logs the thing because it's our middleware, gives us the response. So yeah, that is about the middleware that we are talking about. So this is how middleware works, and that is what the next function does. The next thing I want to teach you guys is the path-specific middleware. Now, in these middlewares, I haven't given a path, right? So it basically works for every path and every HTTP request. But there are some times where you only want to use a middleware on a specific given path. Let's say /about, homepage, contact, whatever route you actually made, right? Now to do that, you can basically give the path as you would give it to a route, right? Here, what I'm going to do is, let's say I'm going to close this. I'm just going to cut. Actually, I'm just going to comment why cut, right? So this is the middleware that we'll use. What I'm going to do is just give, let's say, a path here. So do that is basically the same as you would do it in the route. So I'm just going to do, let's say, /about. So what happens here is this middleware will only be triggered if and only if the user hits the route about. So here, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to quickly check that, our thing is working, and just do localhost and do 3000. Okay. The thing loads and nothing gets logged. The reason behind it is because we gave a path-specific middleware. So here, if I add about, I come down here, and nothing's getting logged. If I about here, it will basically log the thing that we told it to log. This is what we call a path-specific middleware, right? This middleware will only run if a request starts with about. Now, another thing that I want to teach you guys is you can also make your own middleware. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut everything here, right? And let's focus on these two routes. I'm just gonna format the document really quick. Okay, so it was already formatted. Well, so what I'm gonna do here is what I actually intended to do was I'm gonna make a function, right? I'm gonna make a function that basically checks the login. Did the user actually log in? For that, I'm just gonna use request, response, next, right? And here I'm just gonna do const. Let's say the user didn't log in. So I'm gonna make a boolean here. I misspelled the const. I know that. Give me a second. And let's say that the user didn't log in. So I'm just gonna quickly fix that. Made it worse, but okay. There we go. Right. And let's make a simple if statement saying if logged in is false, we'll just do return. We'll return a response dot status, right? And let's set as 401. That means the user didn't log in. And just do send please log in first, right? So that is what we wanted to do. So this is a function. So this is right now, this is a middleware function that we're going to pass it, right? Now to make it a middleware, what we can do is instead of using app.use, we can basically pass it directly onto a route. Now to do that, we have already made the function, right? The only thing we have to do is basically just pass it here saying check login and put a comma, and that will be a middleware that will run before the get, right? You can also do this, right? So now if I go to our home page, I'm just also gonna come to our tab. Where am I? I'm just gonna come to our thing. I'm just gonna do CLS again to clear that and just do nodemon server.js. That will restart the server just like that. And now we have put the actual middleware in the check login, right? So I'm gonna come to our home page, and when you come to our home page, it will say please log in first. So reason we did that is because the middleware actually modified the response that was getting sent to actual user. As I said in the explanation section, right, middleware can also actually modify the request and the response. So here what happened was the middleware actually modified the response because user was not logged in. So what it did was to send this error saying please log in first. Instead of sending hello world, it will just send the response object. It will just send it to please log in. So this hello world will never get sent to the front end, right? So that is how middlewares can actually change the response. And this is also one of the ways to actually pass middleware into a specific route. Now this will not happen in about because we didn't pass it there. It will just, the hello about will just work but nothing happen because there are no middlewares. However, if I just pass the check login here, it will also be used on this middleware and it will just say please log in first. Pretty simple as that, right? Now here what I can do is basically change the value of the boolean to true. And if I do that, and what's happening? What's happening is we didn't pass the next function, right? I'm just gonna do that, kind of forgot, oops. So here what I can do is it will work just like that. So hello about works fine, right? And there we go. But I forgot one thing was that if I just do not login and put the next here actually, because if I put next here, if I put next here, even if the boolean value is false, the next function still runs because it will never go to the if statement. So if I, let's say, do false, it still works, as you can see. So now if I do put it here, this will not work. So it will say please log in first. So yeah, this is how you can basically make your own logics and make middlewares. Hope you got that. And let's move on to the last thing. The last thing I wanted to show you guys is I'm on the Express.js documentation of middleware, by the way. If you want it, link will be in the video description as always. So this is the actual documentation by Express.js on middlewares. So there are a couple of different types of middlewares, right? If I zoom in again, first one is application level middleware. That means that we use app.level. Router level middleware, basically use the router to actually get it. And error handling middlewares, as I showed you in the thing. this is error handling middleware, right? We basically sends a error response, and also do built-in middlewares. Express already has some built-in middlewares for doing specific things, right? So if I cut all of these, just like that, and just make a middleware here saying app.use, come down here. So here I can basically use the thing. So if I can just click here, built-in middlewares, and there we go. So there's express.static. I'm just gonna use express.json, right? And just paste that here, make the function. And if I just do that, so what basically this does is basically if a client is sending a post request, that means let's say the client is sending something like our request is about I don't know, name Codynn, needs to be a string, coding, and let's say age is 25. So if the client is sending the data here as a JSON file, the express.json, it will basically parse it into a JavaScript object, and you can use it as somewhere around here. So if I just do put that there, put the bracket there, and I can just put like request, not here, do request dot, let's say if the client is sending this as the data, I can just do change request, saying request dot name equals, I can change that to Codynn. So that is different. I'll basically change it or modify it or whatever you want to do, you can do it. Now, the built-in middlewares, we have to learn it. There are a couple of different types of built-in middlewares, like express.static. This will basically be used to access like HTML file, images, and so on. This is what we'll be looking in next episode. Express a URN, it will basically parse their incoming request, the URL encodes payloads. Now, this is something we'll be looking further down in our series. So another is third-party middlewares. Those third-party middlewares are basically the middlewares that other people basically made, and you can just import it into your project and use it, right? You don't have to make the middleware yourself for that. So yeah, that is about middlewares. So yeah, that is pretty much it for today's video. So if you loved it, if you understood middlewares, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And with that said, I'll see you guys in another video. Till then, see ya. In this episode of Express series, we are going to learn how to make our Express server do more than just send text. We'll serve HTML, CSS, images, and JavaScript files from our Express web server, not the live server. This is what we call serving static files. It's what turns your server from just APIs into a fully functional website that users can actually see and interact with. With that said, let's get started. So before we actually start, using all of that and serving files using Express, let's first understand what are static files and why do we actually serve them using Express. Now, static files are the files that do not change on the server and are sent to the browser as it is. That means the files like images, it can be your HTML file, your CSS, and your JavaScript file. Also, I've given the examples right here. Now, the thing is, why do we use Express to serve them, and what is the meaning to serve them, right? The thing is, since they are static files, when the user actually visits your website, it has to land on some kind of front-end code, right? Normally, you can use live server, which we normally use while using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? But this right here is kind of inefficient because it's a front-end server, and still it does the same thing that this Express does. It is way more easier when you're using Express when you're deploying your actual code, because you can just deploy your full stack code from Express and basically host it from there, right? You can also write logics in middlewares, right? Let's say you don't want to show your style.css, and if the user is not authenticated, right, you can use some kind of middleware for authentication and not show some kind of the parts of the code that you don't want to show to the user unless they have some sort of authentication. Now, with that out of the way, how do we actually serve a website? That means how do we actually host our website from Express? Now, after we initiate our project by using npm init, right, or -y, this is the code. And after we do this, and you install Express using npm I express, it generates some kind of folder structure. That can be your node modules, right? Node modules folder and all of that, like all of that code. We make a public folder where we keep all of our files that we want the user to see. That may be our HTML, our CSS, our JavaScript, or some kind of, I don't know, image, all of those, right? They are the files that are not changed from the server and sent to the browser as it is, get displayed to the user. So let's go ahead and go into our computer screen and actually learn how to serve a website using Express, or how to host a website using Express. So here I've already made a project folder that says serving HTML, CSS, and images, right? I'm just going to actually first zoom in a little because you guys cannot see properly. And here what I'm going to do is basically do a few stuff, right? The first thing I need to do is initialize our project. So I'm going to go to our terminal here and basically just type if this thing works. Okay, so I'm just going to do npm init-y that I do for every single one of my videos again. So this will basically generate me a package.json file that has all of our key things. So that says the version, our name, and our test, all of the scripts that again by default comes with the npm init package. Plus we can also add our own scripts by putting whatever we want here. And moving that side, I'm also going to do npm I express. That basically means npm install express, since we are using Express, right? So after that, what I'm going to do is close this and have here, as usual, make my server.js. Right, this is our server.js. I'm going to quickly generate our boilerplate code using the snippets that I have. So I've already talked about this in one of my previous episodes. I think it was in episode 2. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, make sure to check out the actual series in the playlist that will be linked in the video description. After this, what I'm going to do is actually, cut that because I haven't taught you post, because post will be actually topic we'll be covering in next episode. So stay tuned for that. So this right here is a middleware. I have already talked about this in the last video. This basically converts whatever post request is coming from the frontend into a JavaScript object. So with that said, I also don't need this for today's video, so I'm also going to cut it that. Just save that and just go to new terminal here. Now, since we don't have NodeMon installed in this project, I just remember, I'm also going to install that using npm install NodeMon. So that will install NodeMon for us in this project. And then we'll just do NodeMon server.js. So I'm just going to copy that and open our browser here. I have a browser open right here. And it will basically say hello world, right? So this is, again, basic stuff. I'm just giving you a quick revision. At this point, I don't think I have to say all of these things. So here we'll start our actual, serving of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript full project. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a folder called public. So here, as I said in the explanation, we have to make a folder called public. So now whatever files that we upload or we put inside this public file will be publicly available for the user to view from this localhost website, right? So what I'm going to do here is I have one of my projects that I've already put in one of my streams. So I have a project right here. I'm just going to drag it, and inside, I'm going to put it inside our public folder. So this is an index.html and script.js and style.css. So this is a code that I've already put in one of my live streams. It is the stream of the clothing brand website that we made on stream. Now what I need to do is actually use the middleware to actually serve them. So to do that, what I'm going to do is do app.use and pass a built-in middleware that Express already provides us to actually serve whatever we have in our public folder. So to do that, what I'm going to do is do Express, call the Express here, right, which is the import, and just do express.static So this will basically serve all the static files, and we have to pass what to serve as a static file. So in this case, it's our public folder, and we'll basically give a public. So by doing this, what I'm going to do, I'm also going to, I don't remember. There you go. So I'm just going to open the terminal as a new tab here. So after this, what I'm going to do is come to our HTML and put this here. And after this, it will basically host the actual website for us from Express. So this is the actual website that I made using HTML, CSS, JavaScript. If you want the actual code, or if you want to check the stream out about this website, it will be linked down in the description box below. So this is the website. It's fully functional, right? It doesn't have a backend code, obviously, because it's all front end using HTML, CSS, JavaScript. But since Express is a backend language, you can actually integrate backend code into this if you actually wanted to. So that's also one of the reasons like hosting from Express web server is a kind of a good idea. So here by default, if you go to localhost 3000, since we don't have any other code here, what happens is it basically opens our index.html. But if I go to index.html, it basically still opens the same website. However, we can still check the code of other files or static files that we passed in the public folder. So that is style.css. It will give you the whole style.css code right here, right? And also script.js. All of the code that we made inside here. So that is how you actually, serve your project from Express. So that is it for today's video. There isn't much to actually show you in this video because I wanted to still make this video because it was important for our upcoming videos to getting post requests, everything else, also deploying our website. But I still wanted to be a little bit more meaningful. So I'm just going to show you how the big projects actually serve their website from backend. Now, it's not as same as you would expect like this. It's a very basic form of serving your front-end code from backend. However, there's still some kind of similarity. So if I go to youtube.com, I'm still going here and go to our channel here, right? So this is our channel that is Codynn. If I go to inspect here, and you'll see a bunch of code. So if I go to network, right? And here, if I just refresh it, I will get bunch of data or bunch of files that my browser downloads in order to show me every single thing that I need here, right? So that is being the thumbnails, that being all of the JS files that is running, the mini player or offline, and everything. So if I go to mini player as a normal code, this is the mini player code or mini player.js that actual YouTube uses to show whatever the code is for, right? Now it's not same as a normal JavaScript code because it's very complex and bundled version of JavaScript. So you'll not see style.css and everything. It is intentionally made very, very compressed, bundled, and highly unreadable to make sure not everyone can actually see the code and understand what the code is for, because they want to prevent them from getting attacked and also reverse engineering their website. So here there are a couple of things. If you want to check that out, again, it's the same thing. You can basically go into network tab and check it out for yourself. But yeah, this is one of the core mechanics where how you can basically serve a thing and how actually modern websites actually do it. So yeah, that is it for today's video. I know that this video was not as big as other videos, but still is a good concept to learn, and it will be highly needed for upcoming video. So that is it for today's video, guys. I hope you liked the video. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And with that said, I'll see you guys in another video or another stream. So yeah, till then, bye bye. Hello guys, welcome back to another video. So this is the 5th episode of our Express series. In the last episode, we learned how to serve HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files from Express. Today, we're taking it one step further. We are finally handling post request and receiving data from client using Express.json middleware. This is where your backend actually starts talking to your frontend. Let's jump right in. So what exactly is a post request? Now, this is something I've already explained a bunch of times in our previous episodes, but we'll again talk in today's episode because I actually haven't made you get your hands dirty for post request and JSON data. So in this video, we'll be talking mainly for two things: how to send post request and how to actually set up your payload, that is your JSON data. So here, let's understand post request first. So post is a request that is sent from client to the server, right? So this is a request that is sent from client to the server, giving some data to the server. So as you can see, I've written a definition for post request. So I'm just going to read it out loud. So that is a post request, right? A post request is a type of HTTP request, that is HTTP, since we're sending from client to server, right? Which is used to send the data from client to server. Basically, if you want to send some data from client to server, you basically use post request. So that means when you use get request, we have used get request multiple times in our previous episodes, right? So in previous episodes, when we were doing get, we're basically sending the data that is from server to the client, right? But this time we'll basically receive the data from client to server. I'm basically talking from a server perspective. Now, what is JSON? Before we get our hands dirty again with JSON, we have to understand what is JavaScript object. Now, I'm guessing that you are actually learning Express.js. You already know what is a JavaScript object or JS object, right? JS object is basically the almost identical twin of JSON, right? So as you can see, the JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. As you can see from the name, it basically has the same data format of a JS object. So it looks something like this. So I'm gonna picture a scenario. Let's say you're sending the data from client. So client is trying to log in, right? Let's say he sends some email. So I'm just gonna do gmail.com. That is the data. I'm just writing the data, and password is 123. I'm just gonna assume this is the thing. Basically, let's say the client is actually doing some login form, and you are basically sending the email and password to the server to authenticate. Right? This is a pictured scenario. So how do you understand it? So what happens here behind the scenes is, first, let's say you basically put this into a payload. Now, what is payload? So payload is a JS object, or the format of your JS object, that is basically getting sent to the server, right? Let's say in this scenario, it will probably look something like this. So let's say it has, so we'll start our JavaScript object. So let's say that is our email. So I'm just going to use a string. So it will give an email key, and I'm going to use the email that is abc@gmail.com, right? We put comma here. Let's say I'm just going to write password, and let's do 1, 2, 3, right? And we'll close the curly braces. So this is something called a payload. So this will get sent to your backend. So that is pretty much it. So quick revision, we need to understand post request. So we'll basically learn how to do post request, right? Next thing, we're going to learn how to send JSON data. So next thing we are going to learn is to receive JSON data and manipulate the JSON data from client, which is our user. So next, we're going to use a payload, right? You will basically make a payload to give some sort of response to client, right? And at last, we'll basically do a project, right? We'll do a project. Sorry for my bad handwriting. We'll do a project of simple login form. I already have a written code for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Again, it will be linked down in the description box below if you actually want to check that out. And this will basically send a post request that will basically have the API to our route to our server. And our server will give some sort of response, and we'll just print the response. So that is for all the content that we have to cover in today's video. So hope you're excited. If you are, hit that like button, and let's move on to our computer screen. So we are here in our VS Code. I'm just going to quickly make a new Express code. Oops, I closed it. So we'll basically make our Express setup here. I'm just going to do npm init y, just like that. That will basically give us a package.json file for our Node package manager. And also basically do npm I express. That basically means npm install express. That will basically install express packages from our npm package manager or Node package manager. So after this, what I'm going to do is also create a server.js as normal, not JSX, server.js. And here we also have to install nodemon because we don't have nodemon in this package, since this is a new package. So I'm just going to do nodemon, not nodemon, npm install nodemon. So that'll basically install nodemon here. So there we go. And after that, we should be fine, right? So after this, what I'm going to do is make our Express boilerplate. So I'm just going to use the snippets. So here we already have a post written for us, but I'm also going to close this because I haven't taught you, right? And this is our bare minimum Express boilerplate that basically prints hello world. I'm also going to close this route because I don't want to define a route for now. Let's first define a post route, right? Now to define a post route, the syntax of post route is exactly the same as you would make for get route. The route handler logic is different, right? So let's go ahead and do it. So we know how to define a route. You use the app, which is the Express web server object, and then we put our HTTP request. So in this time, we have to use post since this is a post request video. And after this, we define a path. So let's say the path for the post is /login, right? And here I'm gonna get comma and define our handler. So here I'm gonna do request response. This is the syntax. You cannot alter this, right? This still needs to be request and this still needs to be response. So after this, what I need to do, I'm basically gonna write my logic. So our logic will be very straightforward. I already have a public folder that basically has an index.html. I just created it. So this, what I'm going to do is this is the front end code that will basically be from the front end, right? So this is basically a simple code that basically has a form, two input fields, that is username and password, and the user has to fill these two, right? You can also put required here, but I'm not going to do that. It's fine. And we'll basically do, when hitting submit, it will basically trigger this send data function. So in JavaScript, we have a send data function right here, which will basically first make payload. So this is what we call a payload. This is the structure or data format that will basically be sent to backend, right? So this data right here, data object, right? Data object will basically be sent to our server.js file or the Express server. I'm only going to type Express server, right? This will basically be sent to Express server here. So right here, we have a fetch function. So here, what it does is basically gets the route. So this right here is a route, since you see this /login here. Method here is post. Since we're sending the data, it is a post request. In headers is saying it is a JSON format data. And this right here is basically stringifying it. So this right here will basically convert the data, which is data object, which right now is JS object. It will convert that to JSON, right? This right here will convert that into JSON. And then we'll get the response.text. So whatever text that the server responds, right? And we'll basically put the message that is, the message that was sent from the server. We'll basically put that into alert message. So that is the whole logic. I only explained it, but you already get it since we probably know JavaScript. So here, what I'm going to do is whatever response that is coming from, or in this case, whatever request that is coming from the front end, we'll basically log that, right? We'll just do console.log and just do request.body. Now you might be thinking, where is this defined, right? Where is this defined? Right now, this right here is undefined because JavaScript cannot read this since it's a JSON file if you don't change it into JavaScript object. Now to change whatever response or whatever request that is coming from the front end, we can use a built-in middleware that the Express has already provided us. So that is, we'll use app.use. We'll basically make a middleware. Here we'll do express.json. So this right here will basically convert this, which is JSON file, right? This right here will basically send a JSON file. This will basically convert that into JavaScript object so we can basically use our JS functions, right? And after this, I'll send a response to the front end. Since we have already received the data, we'll basically send a sweet response saying welcome the user. So here we have the user, right? We'll basically print the user's name. So we'll basically do a welcome. So we'll do request.body. So this right here is the JavaScript object. So after this converts the JSON into JavaScript object, this right here will be a JavaScript object, and this will not be undefined. I'm going to show you what happens if you don't write or don't use this. So here I'm going to do that. And since it's username, right? I'm going to do .username. So this should be the finished code. The only thing that's left to do is to host our or serve our HTML file. I'm just going to do app.use. So we learned in the last episode that express.static, and if you pass the public folder that we made, it will basically host the thing for us, right? Pretty standard stuff right here. Now let's go ahead and print this. So I need to start the server here. Do nodemon server.js. I already have nodemon installed. So let's go ahead and whip out our thing. There we go. I'm going to refresh one more time. So here I'm going to do, let's say that I'm going to send Codynn and password. I'm just going to do 123, hit submit, and this will basically say welcome Codynn. And the whatever value that we sent from the front end also gets logged here. That is username Codynn and password 123. So that is how you get post request. Now I told you that I would show you what happens if you don't basically parse the data. I'm going to comment that part out, and we'll go back to our front end code, right? I'm going to refresh again. Here I'm going to do, let's say I'm going to send Codynn and send again the same thing. If I do it now, this will give us a whole bunch of crap. So here this says type error. So we also logged whatever value that was coming from the thing. So I'm going to go to our terminal, which is our log. So if we come that here, I'm going to put this into a new tab. As you can see, it says type error cannot read the undefined reading username, whatever, right? That means it cannot read whatever value that was getting passed from the request.body. It cannot read it. Now, this was getting logged, but you cannot read it. So it basically logged the error, right? Pretty standard. Now, if we uncomment this whole part again, I hope you understood the actual importance of actually parsing the data from JSON to JavaScript object. You have to do every single time while you make a JS file, right? This right here is very, very important. So now what we can do is let's move on to another step. So we're going to add authentication here. If I'm gonna, I need to open the terminal here because I just shut off for some reason. So I'm just going to do no server.js, right? I'm going to start the server again. And here is our server. Now, I'm going to put it in my second monitor for now. So let's add authentication here. I'm going to make this terminal my new tab. Now to add a authenticator, we can use a middleware. We learned in the middleware video that we can basically use the middleware to make authentication, like have authentication, right? So for that, I'm going to make a function that will basically say validate user. This will take a request, response, and next being, for the next middleware. Now at first, what we need to do is extract the username and password. To do that, what I can do is just do const username and password. Now, from what are we extracting it from? That is the request.body that is getting parsed by express.json. So this will extract the username and password, which we are providing here, right? Username and password. Now this will get stored into username and password. Now we can use to authenticate. Now we need to compare the username password with something. So let's make a quick little variable. So just doing a simulation. So let's say a variable name db username. So just a random password since we don't have database right now. So we'll just make variables. I'm gonna copy paste that and just do here what I can do is just do db password password and just type 1234, right? And now what I can do is basically check. We'll use a simple if statement. We'll check if username is equal to db username, and we also have to check for the password. So we'll check if password is equal to db password. Now if it is, we'll basically do console.log. We'll first log the values. So we'll do log user validated. We'll just do that, right? Now, since it's our middleware, we also have to use the next, which basically sends to appropriate middleware or the next route. So here, after validating here, I can just do next. This will basically send it to this post request, right? Or the actual handler, not post request. The actual handler. Now we have to put a else statement here. What if the user is not verified? We'll directly send the response here, doing return response dot status. Since this is a function, we'll do status and we'll just send a 404 saying send. It will basically say user not found. I mean, this is not the appropriate error message, but you can basically get creative with this, right? So after this, what I can do is need to pass the function that we made as a middleware. So to do that, I can just basically pass it right here, saying validate user, and then this will act as a middleware. So let's go ahead and actually check. I'm going to save this code and basically whip out our login form. I'm going to refresh for again. Now I can just do Codynn and just type what is our username again? So it's Codynn and 1234, right? We'll hit submit. We'll say welcome Codynn. Now let's try adding a different thing. So we'll do Codynn, but this time password we'll basically put 12345. So this is incorrect. This will say user not found. So this is a good way or good example of using the post request and also using middleware. And that's it for today's video, guys. I hope you liked the video. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you have any questions regarding today's lesson, then please drop them down in the comments down below and I'll hopefully reply to them. Okay, and till then, I'll see you guys in another video. Bye bye. Hey everyone, welcome back to Express.js series. In the last episode, we learned how to handle post requests and JSON data. Today, we're going to talk about something that every real Express app uses: Express Router. Now, a lot of beginners think routers exist just to put similar routes together. But actually, routers are much more powerful than that. And I'll show you why. So, let's get started. Okay, I'm on my VS Code now. So here what I'm going to do is do npm init-y, our usual stuff. Just getting our Express server ready. So I'm also going to do npm I express. That will install Express, or will import Express, same thing. And also install nodemon. So those two things, we always install it. So I'm just going to do that. Next, I'm just going to install our server, or not install, make our server.js file. So that is it. Now I have a code here that is 70 lines of code and it's completely messy. So if you can see here, it's nothing fancy, right? There are a lot of comments here. So I can just cut one of the comments. So this, as I said in the last video, will parse the JSON bodies to JavaScript object. So here we have one route, there we have another route, there we have another route. So there are a bunch of routes all together. And the server.js code is extremely messy. Now, this is very basic server.js code. However, if you don't organize your routes, this can be a total nightmare. So to organize all of the routes and keep them in check, we use something called express routers. So all of these codes, there are a bunch of things that I haven't taught you, so you can just ignore them for now. But one thing you have to understand it from here, and the only thing to understand it that I'm trying to actually explain is basically routers help you to organize your code, right? But how do you actually make them? So to make routers, what you need to do, or the traditional way of making routers, is to make a folder called routes. So this, it will be a parent folder that will basically hold all of our sub routes. So let's say inside this, I make another folder, or let's say I just make directly a file that is products.js. So this is basically another file that will get imported later in our server.js file. Now I'm going to cut all of this code in server.js and make our daily boilerplate. So I'm just going to leave that there. There we go. So inside the server.js, this will be the main code. Now in product.js, we're going to use routers. So first we have to import Express, since router is a part of Express kit, right? Now we'll make a variable called router, which will be an object that will represent our router. And we'll do express.router. So this right here is basically a router object. So this is basically an instance of router that we can use to actually make routes. So this right here will basically be the same as you would basically use your app. So you can also say that this is a mini version of app, right? The thing that we used here. Since this is a subcategory of that, so you can also say that this is a mini version of app. So this router variable, you would basically use it exactly as you would use app. Now here what I'm going to do is define a route. To do that, you can use router. You make a route and just do get. Now inside this, what I can do is pass a path. So I'm just going to give it the home of products, right? So here what I can do is give a home and just let's say we do request, do response, make our normal route handler, and just send a response saying, let's say this is all products, right? So this is basically a route that will say all products when the front end hits this route. Now we have made this router, we also have to export this router, otherwise we cannot import it in our server.js. Now to export it, you can just do module. So this is the syntax, do module.exports, and we will type whatever we want to export. In this case, we want to export our router variable here, or router object. We'll basically pass router as an object, right? So this will basically import or export, all of our routes that we have created inside this product.js. Now to import this into our server.js, there are a couple of different ways. One is you can make a variable here saying, let's say products route or something like that. You can name it whatever you want, obviously, and do require and do dot slash. That'll basically list your current folder. So in this case, since our server.js is in our root folder, this will basically give the contents of root folder. If I were to do the same in product.js, this will basically return nothing because the product.js is the only file in the routes folder. So if I want to go one step backwards, I can do dot dot slash. This will take me one step backward. So you can basically, do like that. So I just wanted to demonstrate that. I'm gonna come back here. I'm gonna save that. So here I can just give dot slash and go to our routes folder, hit slash again, and select our product.js. So this is basically a variable that represents the routers that has been exported from the product.js. So here I can make a middleware saying app.use, which will basically check if the route is products. So if the route is product or the path is product, we'll basically send it to our products route, right? And the product.js will handle the responses. Now let's actually start the server here, do nodemon server.js, open our thing, put this into a new tab, just like that. And here we have hello world. So this is the response here, this is the by default response. Now what I can do is just go to our products route. And as you can see, it says all products. That is the response that we basically made here. So our route is working perfectly. You can also take it one step forward, directly importing the route here. We don't have to make variables every single time here. So you can also do this, right? I'm going to put a comment saying product route here to make it much more cleaner. This will still work, as you can see. So if I go back like this and go to products again, this will work just like that. I keep hitting Control Save for some reason. And that is how you make routers. Now, another thing you can do is basically make middlewares, right? You can also put like router.post. Now, this is for you to experiment. You can make multiple routes in one single router. Or you can also make another route. So let's say we have another route. I'm going to make another route here saying, let's say users.js. I'm going to copy this and paste right here. So it's the same thing. The only difference here is we can basically change the response here. So let's say that this basically sends a JSON data. So if you want to send JSON data to frontend, you can basically use the JSON. So inside the JSON, you can basically pass the JSON response. So let's say the user name is, let's say Alice, and her age is, let's say 10, right? Makes sense? So we can basically import this into here, our server.js, copy paste that. Let's say if the path is users, redirect it to users. Since product and users is in the same folder structure, we can basically just replace that and it will just work. Come back to our route here, put users here, and this will give the JSON response that the users was responding, right? It responded with a JSON data. You can also get creative here, putting an array of this and having multiple JSON response or JSON data, just like that. Let's say the second one is, I don't know, John, and his age is 60, assuming. And if you hit save here, it will give us an array of JSON data. So that is how you make routers, right? To organize your code, your app.js does not look that messy, right? All of your routes are organized, but that is not the only thing that router does. Router has much more different uses. One of the main uses is to make middlewares. So let's say in products, I can make a middleware saying, I don't know. So let's say I make a middleware here. You can make middleware by using app.use as I taught you. So let's say we make a middleware here saying request, response, and next. And here I can just basically do console.log. We'll just make a basic middleware here. We'll just say access, or just do products route access. It will basically log this into our terminal, right? And there we go. So now if I go here, so I did something wrong. I forgot to use app. Okay, sorry, I used app. That is a bad habit of mine. So that is router. Okay, there we go. So that will basically run that. So that's great. So let's say if we now accessed our products, one thing I'm going to do is restart the server, because this will basically clear out the terminal. So here, if I just do products, right, it will basically log this. Now I forgot to use next, which you shouldn't, right? But my bad. So this will basically say all products, and it will also log this into our terminal. So that is pretty much it for the concept of router. So yeah. One quick little tip that I can show you guys is basically a concept called API versioning. So let's say you have a pre-existing version of API that is, let's say, products 1. So I can basically rename this, right? And we can rename this to products 1. So this is the you can press yes, it will basically update wherever you have imported this to products 1, so you don't have to change it manually, by the way. So let's say you have another products, right? That's a product2.js. So let's say this is your version 2 of your products API. So you can basically copy that. So I'm going to make few changes. So let's say that this API, instead of saying all products, it basically returns a JSON data. So let's say I can give a quick name of product. So let's say a phone, and also gives the price. Let's say price, let's say, is 4,500. So that is the price. I just came up with that randomly. Also put that into string, otherwise this will be a variable. So here, what I'm going to do in server.js, so let's say we are using 2 routes now. So one is products 1, that is version 1 of product API. But let's say another is product 2, which is another version, which is the new version of product API. So you can basically use multiple versions side by side using routers. Let's say if I do version 2 or something like that, I can just do version 2. Change the route, right? And this will basically give us the second thing, right? And that is how you actually use router. And that's it for today's video, guys. I hope you understood the actual concept and the use case of routers. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And now I hope you don't say that routers are only for, making your code clean and organized. They have much more use cases than that. Until then, I'll see you guys in another video. Bye bye. So in the episode 4 of Express.js series, we served HTML, CSS, and JS, and images, and all the static files. But static pages can only do so much, right? Today we're going to unlock dynamic HTML using something very powerful, EJS. Let's jump right in. So here we are in our computer screen, and we'll just make our normal folder structure first. We'll do npm init-y, it will initialize npm package manager, and also do npm i express, that means npm install express. Also do npm i nodemon to save our saved files. So after that, what I'm going to do is create our server.js as usual and use our express snippets to create a normal snippet. So this is one thing, but today we'll be looking at something very important. So today we'll learn how to actually dynamically render HTML files from Express. So I'm going to propose a problem. So here what I'm going to do is, as we learned in our serving HTML files in episode 4, we learned that if you made an index.html here and make some boilerplate, so I'm just going to quickly do something. Let's say h1, we'll do welcome, let's say Codynn, right? We'll do welcome Codynn. And what I'm going to do here is serve our files. So we can do app.use, make the middleware here, and do express, we'll do express.static, and we'll pass our public folder. Now if we do that and start our server, if I go new terminal in here, and just do nodemon server.js here, and open our thing, it will basically say welcome Codynn. So this is how we learn to actually serve index.html files. However, I want to tell you something, right? What if I want to dynamically change the value of Codynn here, right? I need to change it from here. Let's say I can do Codynn 1 or something like that. If I refresh this, it will say Codynn 1, right? But I want to dynamically change it by passing some sort of variable. Can I do that here? No. However, that is how real websites work. Let's say you're logging into a website. It doesn't say like welcome user. It says the username that you entered while signing up for that whatever website. right? Now we need to change it according to that. So that's why we need EJS, or it also stands for Embedded JavaScript. Now let's go to our Google here. I'm gonna whip out my Google here, right? And we'll search for EJS, right? It will give you some sort of, like, AI will give you some sort of code, but we don't care about that. We'll click on the first link, and this is the official documentation or official website of EJS. It also has the full form right here, and this is the code, or this is the syntax to write EJS. Before that, we have to install it. However, we need it for Express separately. So what I need to do here is come down. I can also search doing Express. You can do Control F and search Express, and it will take you to this. So this is using EJS with Express, right? We only care about this. We'll click on the GitHub wiki page. This is the official documentation for using EJS with Express. So here first we have to install EJS. So the command to install EJS in our project is doing npm install EJS. So let me just quickly do that. We'll copy the code, whip out our VS Code here. We'll clear out the thing and just do npm install EJS. So this will start installing EJS in our node modules. Now, how do we actually use it though? To start using this, what I'm going to do is basically make a folder called views. We'll make a folder called views. Inside this folder, what we need to do is basically make an EJS file, not an HTML file, right? So here what I can do is just create a EJS. So this is a EJS file. But I'm going to copy this. Sorry, I can just cut this and paste it into here. So this is the EJS file, right? Now, since we're using EJS, we can dynamically change this or change the value of Codynn here. So here what I can do is use the EJS syntax. So if I go back to our official documentation here, and if you come down here, it says in Express v4, a very basic set of EJS would look like the following, right? So this is what it will look like. So I will just copy this and we'll paste it into our VS Code here, right? Not like that, right here. Now after doing this, we can basically pass whatever value inside this and it will just show it dynamically here, right? You don't have to change it from HTML. We can basically change it from our backend. Now how you do this is basically, let's say we basically do username. So this is basically the value of the variable, or not, the name of the variable. So here in the server.js, we have to actually specify first that we are using a EJS view engine or EJS template engine. So to do that, I'm going to first cut this because we are not using the static, we are not serving a static file anymore. And here I'm just going to do app.set. It basically sets our Express web server to, let's say, use view engine. And we'll just basically do EJS. So this will basically say that use EJS as our view engine, right? Now we can use our EJS or we can use our EJS functions, right? We have already set up our folder structure here according to here, right? According to documentation. And it says to, as you can see, it says to set the view engine to EJS. And next it says to make a route. So let's quickly do that. We have already learned how to make routes countless times in previous episodes. So we'll do app.get. Let's say the path we specify as homepage, and we'll basically do request and response as usual as request and response object. And here what I can do is basically do response. As response, we'll do render, right? We'll render our, what will we render? We'll render our index.ejs. You can either type index.ejs or you can just type index, right? It doesn't really matter, it's the same thing. Now doing that much, if I go back to our, EJS documentation here, it says that the value of the variable must be passed through an object, right? As you can see here, he has passed the foo, which is the foo variable right here that we have as username in our case, right? So we have to pass that as a variable inside an object. So let's quickly make an object here saying index.ejs. Now right here it says some kind of error because it cannot read the EJS format. Now to fix that, you can basically add a EJS language support extension here. So you can quickly install that. It will get installed in seconds. Now if you do that, the error should be gone, and you can also type EJS or EJS syntax by using this, right? And that's the EJS comments, and also what we have here, EJS each. It basically types the whole for loop syntax for you in a second. So you don't have to do everything, type everything by yourself. Now let's quickly just look at here, right? We have username variable, you have to pass it through here as an object. So you'll make an object saying we have username, so you have to make it as username, and let's say username, we pass it as Codynn123. Now if we just run the server again, so here I'll just do nodemon server.js. If we do that and open our thing here, it will basically say Codynn123. So it dynamically changed the value of the HTML content through our backend server, right? So you don't have to make like a billion different HTML pages for, doing single thing. So that is what EJS is used for, mainly just to dynamically change the content of the HTML file. Another thing that is used for is basically making HTML components. How do we use it? If we go here and make another EJS file saying, let's say footer. So let's suppose that my footer HTML element is being used in multiple different HTML page, right? What we can do in this scenario is basically make a footer element here, which is a code snippet, and reuse it in every single one of our EJS file. So how do we do it? So at first we need a footer element. So I already made a footer element here. It's basically a very simple footer element with some background styling and a text content with some copyright content. So how do we use this HTML element inside our index.js file? Now, if you have already installed the EJS language support, what you can just do is just type EJS and include. So you will see this code snippet. So it'll basically type it for you, right? Inside this, we'll pass our footer element or footer.ejs. So since it's already in the same folder as index.ejs, which is our file we are importing from, you can just type footer and it will be there. However, if this footer was inside another folder, we have to give the correct path. So let's say if I make another folder here saying footer, right? Footer, and shove that footer into there. What we need to do is pass the footer inside this include. So in this case now, it is footer/footer.ejs. So we can do footer/footer.ejs. As I said before, we don't have to write EJS most of the time. So I can just cut that just like that. Now, if we go back to our HTML file, this right here, which has hello username. Now, if I refresh this, you will see the footer that I made onto there. I didn't write any HTML here. I just imported the pre-made footer.ejs into this. So what I can do is reuse this footer.ejs in multiple different EJS files. I don't have to like copy paste like you would do in normal HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You can also pass array of objects or arrays, right? What I can do, let's say I make an array here. So let A be the array. Let's say ARR is array, which is, let's say numbers. So we can do 1, 2, let's do 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Now what I can do here is pass this array inside this. So I can just do like that. I can just do array, something like that, and pass array, right? You can change this variable name to whatever you want and have this array somewhere around here. So if I do EJS and we'll do for 4, so this will write a for syntax for me. Since we have the variable named as ARR, not array, I'll change that to ARR. So they'll basically do until the array of length, we'll just probably print h1 element, let's say, and we can just, let's say, do count, and we can use the array. So since array is 1, 2, 3, 4, we can just do count, we'll do EJS, and we'll do equals to here, and put array since we are using that, we can pass the index. So we'll just pass the index here. So now if we come back here, right, if we refresh, this will dynamically update our content, right? So this is how you use EJS to actually dynamically change the content of your HTML file. And that's it for today's video, guys. I hope you learned about EJS and I had a vague idea what EJS is about. If you did, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to further learn more about EJS, I'll leave documentation linked down in the description box below. Until then, I'll see you guys in another video. Bye-bye. Hey everyone, today we're tackling errors in Express.js. We will handle every single one of our errors that may occur in Express.js and making sure your app stays cool even when things go wrong. Without further ado, let's get started. I'm here in my computer screen and I'm just gonna make a quick Express project. I'm just gonna do npm init -y first. I do this in every single one of my episodes because I hope this command or these commands actually stick to your brain, or you just, remember these just from that, right? And I also do npm I express, just like that. This will basically import or download Express modules in our project, and also do npm install nodemon. This will install nodemon, which is basically a better version of server start. Instead of doing node server.js, you do nodemon server.js. I have already taught this in previous episodes, so I'm not gonna go too deep in this video. So here I'm just gonna do server.js, make our server.js file, and also do make our boilerplate, cut one of these because I don't think we need post. So here what I'm going to do is actually start the server. I forgot to start the server actually. So I'm just going to do npm, or not npm, do nodemon server.js. If I do that, this will basically start the server at localhost 3000, open the localhost 3000 port, and here this will basically say hello world. Nothing fancy, it's just the normal code because it just says hello world. Now here, I want to add few things to start with errors, right? I'm going to add another route here saying about. This will basically say hello about, right? This is another route in our backend. This will basically say hello about. Now, if I go to that, right, refresh just in case, also do about, this will say hello about. Nothing new. However, what if I am a user and I accidentally misspelled my route or misspelled my URL? I basically typed double T. I'm a user, I can make that mistake, right? If I do that, this says cannot get /about. Now, as a developer, you might know that this says there's no route that is about with double T. Now, as a user, he might not be a developer, or you cannot expect the user to actually know this. That's why error handling is so much important, because as a user, you want the best user experience that a website can give. So here, how to handle this? There are a couple different ways, right? The first way I can do is basically make a middleware at the end. So if none of the routes actually work, I can basically safely handle that using the use method. This will basically create a middleware, and I just say request, response, and next. The syntax to make route, I don't have to teach you anymore, I hope. If you don't know how to make routes, make sure to check our previous episodes of middleware or routes, right? I'm going to make a quick middleware saying if none of the routes work, I'm just going to do response, send the response for status 404. That means the page is not found, right? And here I can just do send whatever I want to send. In this case, let's say I want to send a string saying, oops, oops, page not found. Oops, page not found. Maybe check your spelling. I can do that, right? Now, if I open the thing one more time, if I refresh this, this will say, oops, page not found, maybe check your spelling. Now, this is one way of doing it, right? Now, there are also other different ways to basically make it more interactive or more presentable. Now to do that, I want to show you a quick example. Let's say I go to youtube.com and basically type whatever route, right? Now this route does not exist in youtube.com. Now, so if I go to that, now this will basically return a page that is basically built for this specific error. This says, this page isn't available. Sorry for that. Try searching for something else, right? This is one of the things you can basically handle. Same for google.com. If I do Google and type something, it will basically say 404, that's an error. The requested URL, this, was not found on this server. Every single one of the websites have these kind of pages. Some might not, some actually do. Now to basically solve that and present this kind of error handling, what you can do is, as we studied in last video, we can basically make a views folder, right? And here I can basically make a index.html and basically paste our code. Now this is the code I'd basically have if I go live here. If I wanted to show you guys this thing, let's say this is our 404 page. If a user goes to a URL that does not exist, I want him to land on this page. So we have this HTML. So this is getting served by a different live server. We don't want that. We basically want to control it using Express. Now to do that, I'm going to close this. To do that, what I'm going to do is basically keep this into the views folder, right? I can basically make another middleware or basically just pass it into here. What I can do is, instead of using this send function, I can basically use the send file function. This basically sends a file as a response. So I basically have to give the directory. Now to do that, what I can do is basically use dir name. Dir name basically returns your current project folder directory. And we have to add the views folder. Since this basically returns the root project directory, we have to add the views. So what I can do is basically do plus, add a string here saying views slash index.html. Now in this case, it doesn't have to be index.html. You can basically name it whatever you want. Now, if I go here, if I whip out our error file, right? If I do this, makes sense, right? I have zoomed it a lot, but yeah, this is how you will handle these kind of things, right? Now, next thing I need to teach you guys is the list of error codes. So these are some of the error codes that you can basically use, right? So error 400 is a bad request. 401 is unauthorized. That means there is some kind of authorization required to actually hit the API, whether it be cookies or tokens. 403 is forbidden. That means you don't have the permission. 404 not found is one of the methods that I showed you. That means the URL is unavailable. And 500 means internal server error. So there is some kind of error in server side, right? 502 is bad gateway, and 503 is service unavailable. Now what you can do here is basically see all of these error codes and basically paste it here. So let's say I want to build one for this. I can just copy this and paste it here, pass the status 500 as the error code, and basically display whatever I want. So for example, I can just do send and send something. So I can just do, this is 500 error code. There is some server issue. So I can just do that, right? Now this is very inefficient because you have to keep making different middlewares. So how many will you make, right? If there was a way where you can basically handle all of the errors by one middleware, that would be great, right? So that is how we will basically do it, right? What I'm going to do is basically make a global error handler. So I can just do global error handler. So whatever error that I get, or whatever error that might occur, this will basically trigger this middleware. Now for that, I'm just going to use app.use and pass our things, do request, response, and next. But I'm also going to pass another parameter here, that is error. Now this is a separate parameter. The value will be basically sending it from another middleware using next, right? So let's say I want to send some sort of error. We can basically do next here and basically send the error in case there is some kind of error, right? So here what I'm going to do is do that and make our route again. And here I'm basically going to log the error first. I can basically do whatever you want. Now here what I can do is basically do error.stack. This will basically give me a detailed report on what actually is the error to basically, debug, right? Another thing I can do is basically do response.status. Now I have already logged the error. Now I also have to send appropriate response. Now to do that, I can just do response.send error status. This will basically send the status, and this will basically send, I can just do whatever thing. In this case, I'm just going to send oops, error occurred, right? I can just do that. Now, the actual thing about this error is I can basically check what kind of error this is. Since we are basically passing a error object, we can check if error.status is a 404. If that is, we can basically send the error status, right? I can basically cut this and paste it here. So in case of 404 error, this will basically send this response, right? I can basically just copy this a bunch of times, or you can also use switch case statement. You can do whatever you want. I'm also going to add another else if statement with same block. I also need to pass condition here. And let's say the second one is 500, right? And I'm just going to copy paste that here. And this basically said, send this, and let's say this says 404, and this says 500, right? In case of these errors, what I can do is basically use them. Now, how do we actually use them then? So I will basically make a actual scenario here. So inside another route, I'm going to make another route here, somewhere around here. Instead of doing this, I'm going to make a body. So let's suppose that some kind of data was supposed to come from the front end, and that ended up being null, right? So data didn't receive, or we didn't receive the data. In that case, what I can do, if data is null, that means data does not exist, we can basically write a logic. So remember this, that data that we were supposed to get was null. That means there was no data sent from the front end, right? So if the data is null, I can basically do const error. Since we have to pass this as a parameter into next, right? We also have to store this into variable. Now here I can just do new error, make a new object here, and let's say that says post not found, right? Or I can just do data not found, right? And here I can basically set the error status to be, let's say 404, since this is not found, right? And I can basically pass this into that. I can basically do next and pass in the actual error variable. Now, next thing what I need to do is do a few stuff. That is, this has the same route, so I need to change that. Let's say this is data. Let's say I'm just going to put a data route, and also have to pass in next, since we have used next, but it is not defined here. So I also have to define that, and I think we should be done. So I'm going to whip out our web server here, and here this should work fine. I'm going to change that to data, and this says, oops, error occurred 404, right? So this will basically send this error response. Now, what if I want to send a different error response? I can change that here. So we have cached 500, so I'm just going to pass 500 here. And if I refresh this page now, this will basically say error occurred 500. Now let's say the data that we sent is not null, so I'm going to give some value. So let's say there is some value. In this case, this will basically, let's say, give that. I'm also gonna put the data. This will also print the data here. So I'm just gonna do that and refresh. There is some data. I did some syntax error here. There we go. There we go. This will basically print that as well, right? I'm gonna do that again. And there we go. There's also an official documentation from Express regarding error handling. So if you want to check that out, I'm also going to leave the documentation link down in the description box below. And yeah, till then, I'll see you guys in another video. Bye-bye. In this video, we're diving into databases and exploring how data is actually stored and managed. We'll be using MongoDB with Express to create model and insert data, giving you a clear view on how backend data flows in real application. So let's begin. Now, to get started with MongoDB, you guessed it, MongoDB. So to install MongoDB, what you can do is just search MongoDB, click on the first link, and on the nav bar right over here that says products, and on the bottom right corner that will say try community edition, we'll basically download this one. So click on download. Now this will take you into another page, and here there are a bunch of options for a bunch of different operating systems. I'm using Windows as always, so I'm just going to click on Windows. Now there are a bunch of other options for different operating system while you're using for whatever operating system you're using. If you're using macOS, just install for macOS. There's for Debian, Amazon Linux, Red Hat CentOS, Ubuntu, you name it. And here I'm just going to click on download, and this will just get started downloading, right? Now while it downloads, I want to teach you what our database is. So database basically means a place where you store data, right? Now, ideally, there are a bunch of different types of databases. MySQL, which is a relational database that basically stores data in a tabular structure. So as you can see, this is a kind of a format of MySQL database that basically stores the data in a tabular format. That means there are rows and columns, right? There are a bunch of columns and rows. Now, this is great for a very big amount of data because it makes it efficient to manage all of data. However, if you are just using or dealing with small amount of data, having a tabular structured data, it will just get complicated for no given reason, right? Unless you're actually dealing with a really big data, like let's say training AI models. In that kind of cases, you use relational database. However, if you just want to start a database or just want to learn databases, MySQL is kind of complicated. So that's why we choose MongoDB. Now, how does MongoDB stores data? If I just search MongoDB data format, now it says that it stores the data in binary JSON. So what does that mean? It basically stores the data instead of in tabular structure, it stores in a JSON format. So you can directly just fetch the data from JavaScript, since again, JavaScript has a JavaScript object that it can convert to. That makes the whole database a lot easier and user-friendly. So that's why we're using MongoDB. Now, while I talked about all of that, the MongoDB should have been downloaded. You can just click on the exe file. Again, if you're using Linux, this might not be for you. You can just run a command and it will install it for you. Now, in my case, since I'm a Windows user, so here I'm just going to read the license agreement. I read it. And now I hit on next. So after that, I want a complete installation. So I'm just going to click on complete. And here I will just say run service as network service user. I'm just going to check on that, click on next. And also, I'm also going to check install MongoDB Compass. Now, in this video, we'll not be dealing with MongoDB Compass. However, installing it is a really good idea. So because of that, I'm just going to make sure this is checked, and I'm also going to hit next. Now it will just say, should I begin the installation? It will just say install. Now it will ask for user permission or administrator permissions. If it does ask you for it, just give it the permission and you should be good to go. So once the installation is completed, it will just say it's finished and it will automatically open our MongoDB Compass. So here, I'm just gonna hit finish on exe tab, and here it will just say welcome to Compass. So I'm just gonna click on start, and here it will just say whatever thing, just click on next. Now, what I need to do is I need to add a connection first. So as you would host a backend server, you also need something that will host your database. So in this case, I'm just going to say add new connection, and it will just ask for whatever thing. Here, I'm just going to name this MongoDB tutorial, right? And I'm also going to favorite this connection because if I need to, if I have a lot of connections and if I want to sort this by favorites, it will just basically be up there in our left side of the sidebar, right? It's like basically favoriting your photo, right? And here I'm just gonna ignore all of this and just say save and connect. And here it will just start a connection. Now here I can just create a database. I can just say database name. So let's say for this name, I'm just gonna say to MongoDB tutorial, right? Just like this. And I'm just gonna give a collection name. Collection name is kind of a folder, right? So I can just, in this case, I can just give it collection of MongoDB tutorial. You don't need to give this big of a name. I can just cut the collection. I can just give the same name and I can just say create database. Now, so this will basically create a database called MongoDB tutorial, and inside this, it will create a collection. Again, it's also, you can also assume it like a folder, and inside this, you can basically store your data. Now about this, you can basically, do CRUD operations directly from MongoDB. So you can just basically add data here, insert document. Here, I can basically do name, and I can just put Codynn just like that. I can also need to do this. And after this, it will just insert. It will just basically, insert whatever I wrote in the document. Now, this you can basically assume it as a JSON data. You can basically import it in your JavaScript or Express, whatever you want. It's the same thing, obviously. But you can basically perform all of the CRUD operations directly from that. I can also add other stuff. Let's say I want to add few other stuff. So I can just edit document here. And you can basically put plus here, add another field name. And let's say I want to add age, and I can just basically give this as another integer, like integer 2064 or 32. Here I can just basically give like 18 and update it. It will update it accordingly, right? You can also delete the whole thing, saying like that, and it will just get deleted. This is what performing CRUD operations mean. CRUD, or CRUD, whatever you want to call it, basically stands for create, read, update, and delete. Now in this case, you can basically perform all of these operations from MongoDB Compass, as I said, but this is not what this video is for. This is a video that basically teaches you how to perform all of these operations from Express, right? What is the series is. We're not obviously going to perform CRUD operations in this video. This will be our next video, but I will just make sure that you are basically introduced with MongoDB in today's video. Now let's come back to our VS Code, how to basically connect our Express to MongoDB. The first thing I'm going to do is initiate our project. As always, I'm just going to do npm init-y. It will install or initiate a project, right? And also do npm I express. This will install Express in our project folder. And here I'm going to do the most important thing, and that is installing npm I mongoose. Now, what is Mongoose? Mongoose is basically a library that lets you connect, or has built-in features that lets you connect your Express to your MongoDB, right? And here, I'm also gonna install npm I nodemon in case I don't have that, just like that. And this will also install nodemon. So after installing all of that, I'm also gonna create a server.js file. And inside this server.js file, I'm gonna have my hello world code as always, cut all of this, and this is our basic hello world code. Now what I'm going to do is come to our folder structure here, right? And here I'm going to make another file that is db.js. Now db again stands for database. And here I'm going to do few stuff, right? The first thing I'm going to do is import Mongoose. I'm just going to do import Mongoose from Mongoose. Another thing you can do is our typical this, which is you can do const mongoose, and you can basically do mongoose, right? It will also import mongoose for you. Next, I can just do connect db. This is basically a function that we are making. Since we're using a kind of a API, what I need to do is make this a asynchronous function that you have basically probably already read, right, in JavaScript. And here I'm going to use a try method in case our database connection fails. I'm also going to await it and also do mongoose.connect will basically connect our MongoDB. So here, how to connect it from here? We need a API link, right? And that will basically be given from here. Come back to here and you see this MongoDB tutorial. Right click on that and basically click on copy connection string. Click on that. It will give you a string. This is the actual link hosted on the port of localhost 27017. Now after this, what I need to do is go back to our MongoDB. I'm also going to rename this just in case because there's a space here. Let's not give a space because it will just save me while, putting the link here. So here I'm just going to do save. Now I'm just going to hit the thing. So here I can just do MongoDB tutorial. So I can just do MongoDB. I can go back here and just do MongoDB tutorial. Right, this will basically connect your database, correct? So next thing what I need to do is I'm also going to log if it is connected. So I'm just going to do console.log, if this actually connects. I want to run a log saying MongoDB connected. And here I'm also going to use a catch because it's a try catch. I still need to put a catch, right? I'm also going to handle the error and just do console.error. We'll just do MongoDB connection failed. You cannot see anything, so I'll just gonna log the error with the error object that we basically, put as an argument here or parameter. It'll just basically log that. Now that is our thing. I need to export this, and here I'm just gonna do module dot exports equals to connectdb, right? So this is how we will write the code. But you can also do it in another form. If I come back to our package.json, right? And here I can also give a thing saying, I'll just give a dev, right? I'm going to give a dev, and this will basically run nodemon server.js. So I'm just going to tell you what it does in a bit. Just for now, just write this with me. Right? I also have nodemon and all of the other stuff. All of the things that you basically installed, it will just be listed here. So you can, as you can see, we basically installed Express 5, Mongoose 9, version 9, and nodemon version 3.1. So all of the metadata will be in the package.json. Now here I basically have a format called const mongo require mongoose. If I wanted to do this from a different perspective or a different way, which is a updated version. This is a older version of importing the files. What I can do is go to our package.json file, change the type from common.js to module. Now I can import this from something like this. I can just do import mongoose from mongoose, and I can just do export default and just export our function that is connectdb, right? This is basically a newer version to write it. So now we have to import it in our server.js file. So here what I need to do is I can also again do import express from express, just like that. Actually, I need to put this in quotation marks like this. And now what I can do is do the same thing. Here I can import our JS file, which is this right here. I need to do import connectdb from /db, right? I also have to put .js here, otherwise it will not work. I'll cut all of this, right? I'll cut this port and just say connectdb. I will call this function that basically we made. And now we'll basically do either you can just do node-mon server.js as always, or remember what we did in our package.json? We basically made a dev, right? Dev script. Now, whenever you do dev, it will basically run node-mon server.js. So here I can just do, to run the server, I can just do npm run dev. So this will basically run the development server just like that, right? Here it basically says MongoDB connected. That means we are basically successfully connected with MongoDB, right? That is how you connect your Express to MongoDB. All right, now let's move on to one of the most important concepts in MongoDB plus Mongoose, schemas and models, right? So think of schema like a blueprint of your data. So if I come to our structure of folders, and here I'm just going to create a folder saying models, right? Inside models, I can basically create a schema. So here I can just do users.js, right? So this is one of the first schema that we'll make of a user. So schema, again, as I said, is a blueprint of a data. So here I can first import Mongoose, saying import Mongoose from Mongoose, right? It will just directly import it like that. And here I can just do const user schema and just do new Mongoose. And here I can just say schema. So we are basically making a schema. So here we have to define the actual structure of the schema or create a schema, right? Let's say the user data, like the data of a single user, should have a name, right? A user should have name. Data type of that will be string, right? Next, I can give it like a age, for example, and let's say that's a number, right? Age cannot be a string, it has to be a number. Next, what I can do is, let's say, give an email, and let's say that's a string. That is a structure of a single user data. Now, what I can do is we have to create the model. So we have already made a schema, which is a blueprint. We have to create a model, which is the actual user. So I can, for that, I can just do const user equals to mongoose.model. We are creating a model. What will be the name of model? We'll just say user, and we'll basically pass the schema as the schema that we made here, right? Which is the schema right here. Next, I can just export this thing. Export default, and we'll basically export our user. Now here, what you can do after this is install a very nice extension that is MongoDB for VS Code. So this is a application straight up made by officially MongoDB that lets you, use all of the MongoDB Compass features that you basically saw earlier directly from VS Code. Right here, what I need to do is go to our dot, add a connection. So the connection will obviously be our MongoDB connection. I can just say connected with connection string. Here, what I need to do is again come back here, copy the connection string as earlier, and just click on connect, paste your URL here, click enter, and this should start connecting. This will say connected to localhost whatever port, right? So here, as you can see on your left-hand side, as you can see, the database is already here. So we have the documents that we made. So now what I need to do is basically import our schema. So now we don't have a schema here, right? We also don't have anything. So what I need to do is come back to our files, and we have connected our database here. I'm going to make another route saying app.post, since we're basically posting the data. Let's say that is at /users. This will be a sync function, since it's literally a sync function. I also want this to be an arrow function, so I'm just going to do that. And I'm just going to cut that because we don't want any name. And I'm just going to do request response as always and write our route handler. So here I'll just basically make a try block saying const. We'll basically do name and we'll basically do age and we'll do email. Right? We'll do all three of these and basically do that. So here we need a variable that basically has that kind of file. So here in top, I'm going to make a variable saying const dummy data. So this will be a dummy data. Normally what you would do is this data will be coming from front end side or any other sources in a JSON format. So here I'm just going to try to simulate that process by just making a variable that is a JSON. So here I'm just going to pass a variable called name, which will have, let's say, Codynn. And here second will be age, right? Age, let's say, is 15. We also have to follow the schema that we made. Age should be a number, right? Next thing what I need to do is I'm just going to do email. And let's say email is codynn@gmail.com. So this is not our official email. Don't try to contact this email. But for the video, I'm just going to put it. So here I need to paste that, or you can just type that if you want, obviously. So that will be our dummy JSON data, right? I'm also going to put a catch block because this error right here is kind of giving me, triggering my OCD. And here I'm just going to put that so that will get rid of that error, right? So now this right here, this right now is not a schema, right? So this is not a schema. To make sure that it is, what I need to do is make a new object. So here I can do const new user. So this, let's suppose that's a new user. And I'll just basically do await. That's why we basically made a sync, by the way, because we have to create this in according to the schema. I can just do user dot creating a new user. And here I can just do name, age, and email. So that will basically store the name, age, and email inside these three variables, and we'll basically pass that into our user, right? User again being our user.js, where the schema and the model is defined for the user. Next thing what I need to do is send this back as a JSON. Right now, this is a JavaScript object. To send this in our MongoDB database, we have to convert this into a JSON. For that, I'll just do res or response, which is our object. I'll just do response.status will be 201 and just do JSON. Now, inside the JSON, we have to pass what we want to convert the JSON to. What we want to convert the JSON. In this case, we want the new user to be converted into JSON. So we'll pass that from there. And here I can just do console.error. In this case, if we get any error, we'll just do error and just do response.status. If we get any error, that will basically mean a 500 error, which is a server-side error. So I'm just going to pass 500 here. And I'll basically display a message saying message error creating user, right? That means we have made an error creating the user. So that is what we basically do. So now I have made a quick file from public, right? This is an index.html basically made to make a post request on localhost 3000-users. That is our post route, right? That we basically made here. And now I also served it using the static. This is a middleware that we learned from the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to images serving video. Now what I'm going to do is restart our server. So I'm just going to bring my thing here, right? So this is the thing that we have. It's running on localhost 3000, as you can see. So what I'm going to do is add our thing. So let's say our name is Codynn. Age, let's say, is 14. And images we have is just do that, just like that. And now what I'm going to do is just hit submit, right? So let's say it says user created whatever. It's getting the data from the same JSON, right, that we are awaiting. So now what I'm going to do is, since we are sending the data, right? What I'm also going to check if the data is also being created. I need to refresh. So just like that. Here it made a folder called, or collection called users, and stored our data, as you can see. So that is our name, Codynn that we put, and the email, right? We can also add few more if you want. If I come here and add few more, just like that. If I just do submit, it will add one more. So let's check if it did actually add one more. So as you can see, it changed from 1 to 2. One thing I realized is I forgot to make it dynamic. So I'm just going to quickly do that. I will come back to our use server.js. We are basically appending these, which we don't want. So here I'll just use our express.json that we converted, right? So to do that, I'll change the dummy data to request.body. I'll change it to that, and we'll see if it changes dynamically now. So I'm just gonna put this, age, put that, and change that to that. I'll hit submit. We'll see if it actually worked. So I'm just gonna go to here, refresh our database, and come down to users. And let's see, voila, it actually made. Now, one thing that you might be wondering is why it made a separate collection called users. We were supposed to append it into the MongoDB tutorial collection, right? That's a good question. The reason why it did that is because if you don't specify the collection in the schema, MongoDB by default basically creates another plural collection version of the schema and appends the data into there. So here what I'm going to do is specify to make sure it basically appends to that collection. So here I can just basically give the value here saying collection. And here I can specify which collection. In this case, it's MongoDB tutorial. I'm just going to do MongoDB tutorial. And now if we try to append things, so here I'm going to whip out my creates again. Here I'm going to append another thing. Here, just like that, I'm going to hit submit, and we'll see where did it submit. And voila, it did get submitted in the MongoDB tutorial collection. And that's it for today's video, guys. So that was the introduction part of MongoDB. In next episode, we'll be performing CRUD operations from Express to MongoDB. And stay tuned. Till then, I'll see you guys in another video. Make sure to like the video and subscribe if you actually learned something new from this video. And till then, I'll see you guys in another video. Bye-bye. Today we're building a complete Express plus MongoDB CRUD API from scratch. We're going to use get, post, put, and delete, all wired to a real database. That is, we'll be using MongoDB. So if you're excited, hit that like button and let's start the video. So with that out of the way, we are in our computer screen. Now, today what we are going to do is going to build a fold REST API on a user. So in the last episode, we kind of briefly discussed on how Mongoose works, and we did few CRUD operations from Mongoose. But today we'll be doing a complete CRUD operation, that is create, read, update, and delete, using Mongoose MongoDB as our database. So what we're going to do here is I need to initialize my project. So I'm just going to go to new terminal. And here I'm just going to do npm I init-y. This will initialize a node project for me. This will return me a package.json, which has all the metadata. I am going to change few stuff here. That is, as I taught you in the last episode, we're going to use the module syntax, not common.js, and also going to add a dev script that will basically, if I do npm run dev, it will basically run nodemon server.js. Now we need nodemon for this. We don't have nodemon. We also don't have express. So I'm just going to do npm I express here. That will basically install express in our project folder. There we go. I also need nodemon. So I'm also going to install nodemon. So there is express. Now there is nodemon. Next thing what I need is mongoose. So there we go, right? I'm also going to install few other stuff because I need it. So I'm going to teach you what are those when the time comes, but for now, just install it with me if you're following with the video. So here what I'm going to do is do npm i.env. Now what does .env do, or what is .env? I'm going to teach you in a bit. For now, just trust me and install it, right? With that out of the way, I'm going to create a server.js as every single one of my videos, make a express hello world code. Now, I'm not going to run this and show you that it prints hello world because by now you already know what it does and, it's just obvious. So I'm going to cut few things that I don't need. Now, since we are using the module syntax, this does not work. So I'm just going to do import express from express, right? We'll do import express from express, just like that. The first thing that I'm going to change this to API is running. The reason why I do that is because I want to see if the test route for API, right? So this will basically be a test route to see if API is running. So if this runs, that means API is working, right? Makes sense? Makes sense. Now, the next thing what I need to do is basically define few stuff. Now here what I need to do is first import Mongoose because we need Mongoose, right? I'm also going to start my MongoDB server just like that. I am connected. So what I need to do here is first connect to the database, right? That is the first thing that we need to do. Now here what I'm going to do for that is make a db.js as I taught you in the previous episode. So we'll define the connection logic in this file. So I'm just going to do import Mongoose. I need Mongoose to, connect, right? I'm going to import the Mongoose library. I'm going to make a function. So I'm just going to do connect db equals to, since we're connecting to MongoDB database, that means it is a asynchronous function. So we have to define it as asynchronous. So this is a simple arrow function that I'm making. And here, since the database connection can fail, so I'm going to put that into a try block. Now I'm going to write the connection logic, so I need to await it since it's a asynchronous operation. And do Mongoose, call the actual function, and do connect. So this is a function that lets you connect to MongoDB. So here inside this, normally you'll just go here, copy the connection string and paste it here, right? That is how we learned in the previous episodes. Now, in this video, we're not going to do it like that. How are we going to do this, you may ask? I'm going to go to my server.js, right? And import something called import.env. env, remember I installed it, right? So I'm just going to do from .env. So this will basically import .env. Now what is .env? So I'm going to make a file called e.env. So what is this file? This basically is a file that will contain all of our environment variables. That means our API links or database connections, username, passwords, or the database connection links, all of those stuff. So inside this env file, I'm going to define two things because that's the only thing that we need. One is the MongoDB URL, right? So for that, I'm going to paste that there. Now, since we have to define a database, so I'm just going to write express CRUD. So this will be a database. Now in here, we don't have this database. That means if we have, or if we create a new document or send any data, MongoDB will automatically create this database for us, right? And here I'm going to define my port. So usually what you would do is directly write port here. So I don't want to do that because that exposes my port. So I'm going to define the port here. Let's say the port is 5000. Let's do something different. We always do 3000. So I'm just going to use 5000 for this video, right? Now, in order for us to use all of these environment variables, what I need to do is load them into a temporary storage or temporary memory. So what I can do here is .env already has a predefined function to use, that is .env.config. So when I do this, all of the environment variables get loaded, right? All of the environment variables gets loaded into a thing called process.env. Now, what is process? Process is a global Node.js object that basically represents the current Node.js process. And inside that process, it basically loads all of the environment variables into process.env. So when I want to access one of these variables, what I can do is, let's say I want to put this 5000 port in here, so which is the variable. So before, what I did was basically remove the variable that was declaring the port was 3000, right? what I need to do is do process dot env dot. So now we pass the variable name, so that is port. So it defines all of the variables inside the process.env, and you just basically put the port here, just like that, right? I hope it's not overwhelming. If it is, you can try looking into it. It's basically very simple concept. You're basically just importing all of your environment variables inside your, file. That's pretty much it. The reason, you may ask, the thing is these are very sensitive content. Like there can be your database connection details. So you can be database username or password, right? So instead of having to put all of that directly inside the code, which is again, if you're pushing to GitHub, other people can see that, right? So you put this inside this file and you don't push this file to GitHub. So that way your sensitive variables don't get exposed. Another thing is you can basically reuse this every single time, because you might be using all of your API links multiple times. Instead of having to paste that every single time, you can basically just make variables. So I hope you understood the concept. It's a very simple concept. So inside this db.js, I'm going to put a catch block here because it's just giving me error because I don't have a catch block defined. So inside this db.js, I can basically do process.env. Again, this basically gives all of my environment variables. Now, among those variables, I need MongoDB URL. So I'm just going to copy that, paste that there, just like that. That'll give me this link right here. So just imagine as this, as all of this, right? Makes sense. Now, if the connection is successful, right, that is, this actually gets resolved, what I can do is just log to the developer saying MongoDB connected. So I know that it is connected, right? So I'm just going to do MongoDB connected. I can just put that there. This will log me if it's actually successful. Next, in error, I'm just going to log the error. So I'm just going to do console.error, and we can just do MongoDB error and just put the error.message. This will basically put the error message right here. Now, making all of the function, we have to export it in order for us to import it in other files, right? So I need to do export default connect db. So this will basically export this function right here, which is all of this, right? Now we can import it in here saying import connect db from db, right? So after this, I can just do connect db and run this function. So when I do this, I'm basically calling this function, right? Very simple, very simple. As I said before, we're basically making a REST API that basically performs CRUD operations on users' data. Now for that, as I said in previous episode, I taught you, we need to define schemas and models in Mongoose in order for us to actually store the data more structured way. So in the last video, we actually learned how to define schemas and models. So we also have to define models and schemas in this video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a models folder. Inside the models folder, I'm just going to do user.js. Now another thing, I cannot actually put all of the content in today's video. So this video will be of two parts. So I'm going to teach half of it in this video and half of it will be a second part that will come by 3 days from now. So stay tuned for that. Okay. So inside the users.js, I need to define the schemas and export the models. That's it, right? Now for that, we have to use Mongoose. I need to import Mongoose just like that. And here what I need to do is basically define the schema. So for that, I will do user schema, make a variable, right? And do new mongoose.schema. So this is a new object that we have to make. And we are calling the constructor of mongoose.schema. So the schema will be as follows. The first thing I need to define is name, which will, user will have a name. Now I need to define the structure of that data. So here, the first thing I need to define is what type of data type is it. Now name can only be string, so I'm just going to put that as string. Now next thing I can pass is whether it is required or not, right? I can basically define that. Now name, I need that. I cannot afford it to be a null value. So I will just say that I need that name, right? So I will just do required true. So that means this value of the key is required. Otherwise, Mongoose will throw an error. Now, next thing, I'm just going to trim, and I'm just going to trim. So this will basically trim the white spaces. Next is age. User will have a age. Now, age can be a number. So I can just do number, right? The data type will be number, and I need to define another value is the minimum value. Now age cannot be less than 0, so I'm just going to define the minimum value of age as 0, right? Next is email, so I'm just going to put the email. Now email will obviously be a string, just like that. Next, I need that, so I'm just going to do required. I cannot afford this to be empty string or null value, right? So I'm just going to put required just like that. Another thing that I can define here is I want this email to be unique. So I don't want multiple or duplicate emails on different users, right? So what I can do here is pass another value that is unique. Now there are a bunch of different things that you can pass in order for you to do validation checks. So you can just pass unique true. That will basically say that if user puts an email that already exists, it will basically throw an error, right? Next, I'm just going to do lowercase dot true. This will basically change whatever email that is getting passed to lowercase. That's like, it's very easy. After this schema, what I can do is also pass other values. Now, one thing that I want to pass is I want timestamps. Now, timestamps are basically date values. So it will basically say when was the data created, as saying a created at key. It will basically store the values at a create at key, like name and age, and this will say, so this will basically say when the data was created. And if you update the data, it will also store another value of that date into a updated as key. So this will basically make easier for me to actually see the data and work with it, right? So here what I'm going to do is now export the schema and model. So I need to export the schema with a model. So I'm just going to do default. I'm going to use the Mongoose object and just do model. So this will basically export the model with these schema as a parameter. So I'm going to export this as user and put the user schema. So this will basically export the model. So I can work with it inside server.js now. So in server.js, what I want to do is define a middleware saying for routes, right? So I'm just going to comment that part out. So I'm just going to do app.use. So when user goes to /users, so it will basically pass it to user routes. Now, I don't have this defined anywhere, right? Now, for that, I need to define the route. So I'm just going to do routes. So I'm going to make a separate folder to make my code organized, right? I'm going to make a folder called routes, and inside the routes, I'm just going to make a users.js, right? Now inside the user.js, I need to define routes. Now, if we want to make routes outside the server.js, as I said, I've already taught you, we use Express routers. So I need to import routers. I can just do router, import router from Express, right? And here I can just make a object of that router saying just like that, const router router. Now I can define different stuff. I can just do router.post. If basically user hits the homepage that is /users, I'm basically gonna just create a new user because that is a new user, right? I'm just gonna do create user, just like that. So these are the functions that we haven't defined. We need to define it in another folder. So we'll define this function or route handler in a separate folder to make our code even more organized, right? So next, I'm just going to do router.get. So we already have created a user using the post HTTP method because we are sending data to backend, that is post, right? Next is get. I'm just going to do get. Now, if the user sends a get request on the home, that is /users, we'll basically get all of the users, right? That is every single one of the data we have in our database. Next, what I need to do, I'm just going to copy paste this a bunch of times. Next, we have to do is put, so this is update, right? Put basically means update. I'm going to update the user. So next thing what I need to do is make get user for one singular user. So when you do get users, right, it'll basically give all of our users, right? But if I want the value of a single user, we need to trigger the get user. And next is delete. So we are performing all of our CRUD operations, that is delete. And I'm just going to do delete user, just like that. Now, I'm going to give you a small concept, right? Now, we're performing these three operations on a single user. So we are getting the value of a single user, we are updating the value of a single user, and we're deleting the value of a single user. Now, in order for us to do that, we have to separate by something to retrieve the data and make changes to that data. Now, in order for do that, we need some sort of ID or index. So what I'm going to do here is for three of these, right, I need to pass another thing in the route, that is ID. Now, where does this ID come from, you may ask? If we go to MongoDB, right, and if I go to one of our datas, MongoDB by default automatically generates an ID for one singular value. So we'll basically get or send this inside the route and we'll make changes according to that given ID. So for a singular value manipulation, we need to pass the ID in the route. But you might be thinking, how do we actually use it? This is something I'm going to teach you in next episode, that is part 2 of making REST APIs. Don't worry, I'm going to teach you every single thing that you need to make this REST API. Don't worry, right? So I'm going to pass ID for 3 of these routers. And I'm gonna export the router because we need to export it in order for us to use it. So that was the part 1 of building REST APIs. I hope you liked the video and learned something new. If you did, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you have any questions regarding today's lesson, or if you found anything overwhelming, please leave them down in the comments and I will try to answer them to best of my abilities. Until then, I'll see you guys in another video. Bye bye. So in the last video, we actually left off at the specific place where we basically made the routers for all of our routes, right? And said then in this video, we'll be making separate functions, or we can call these controllers. I'm gonna put a quick comment here. These are called controllers. At least these function right here. These are called controllers, right? Route handlers and controllers are the same thing. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to teach you how to use the ID, or how to pass an ID in the URL to perform CRUD operations on specific given data from its ID. So that was the recap of previous video. We also made database connections, we established database connections, and also made our users, and also did few stuff in server.js, right? I also introduced you guys to the env, again, which stands for environment variables, how to use them, what are those, and all that stuff. So today's agenda is pretty straightforward. What we are gonna do today is basically make the controllers and basically test our API using Postman. So Postman is a industry-graded API testing application. So we'll be using Postman, we'll be making workspaces and testing our APIs. So I'll tell you all about that when we get there, but for now, let's start to build our controllers. So to build our controllers, what I'm going to do is make another folder to make our code, again, a lot more organized. And I'm going to make a user controller.js. Since we don't have that many controllers, we only have 4 for our CRUD operations, so we'll be putting all of the controllers in a single file, right? So here what I'm going to do is import user from, we're going to be doing models and user.js, right? So what we're doing here, we're basically importing our model from the user.js. Since this is exporting the model, we are importing the model. Why, you may ask? Because we need that model to perform CRUD operations. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to type const. I'm going to make a function. As I said, controllers are basically function. I'm going to create user, right? Since this will be a synchronous function, since we are, dealing with MongoDB. And here we're going to create our request and response object. And I'm going to make a arrow function, just like that. And since we are also going to be using this inside the users.js, we also need to export this function, right? So we can import it in users.js. So here what I'm going to do is, since we are basically performing CRUD operations, we need to wrap this inside a try block in case there is an error. I'm just going to catch the error saying, and there we go. So here what I'm going to do, first I'm going to get the body, right? Remember in our server.js, we have express.json. So since create user basically creates user, right, we'll be getting the name, age, and email, which is the 3 parameters that we need, right? We'll be getting that from the request object, or, request, right? So here what I'm going to do is store that into name, age, and email. And again, as I said, these 3 parameters will be coming from front end side, so that will be inside our request.body. Now, since we are creating the user, I need to trigger MongoDB query saying create user equals to await. Since we are dealing with MongoDB and it will take time, I'm going to do user, right, which is our model, right? I'm going to do user dot create, and we'll create a user with the name, age, and email that it needs, right? And after creating the user, that means the query was successful, we can basically send a response saying status response is 201. That means that is a good response and there are no errors. And I'm going to send the JSON, that is user. So we'll basically send 201 as our status code, and we'll parse the JavaScript object into JSON and send it as a response, right? That is it for that try block. Next is this. So we need to handle for what if the email is already taken. That means email already exists in our database. So how do we do that? So what happens is, if MongoDB actually recognizes an email that's already inside the database, this will throw an error code of 11,000. I think I also mentioned this in our previous episode. This will send an error code of 11,000, right? So we need to check for that error code in case if error.code, right, if it's 11,000, we'll basically say, or we'll basically send a response saying return response status, that is 400. And we'll basically say, by parsing it to JSON, we'll say error, we'll send an error saying email already exists, right? So that will be the response that we'll be sending. Now, if it's not that, that means that error is something else, and we'll just send the error. We'll just do 400 again, and we'll just send a JSON response. Since we are an API, we cannot do response.send this time, right? We have to send a JSON. We'll just send the error as whatever error message was. So that'll basically send a error message. And that is for the create user. That is pretty much it. We don't have to do anything else. Next is, what was next? So next is get users, right? So this should be pretty straightforward. What I'm going to do is create a new function saying get users, and we'll basically, again, it is a asynchronous operations. We'll basically make our request and response object again. So here we need all of the users, right? This will basically get all of the users, right? So what I'm going to do here is do const users and basically do await. Now we need to run a MongoDB query here saying user dot find. So this query will get all of the data inside our MongoDB database. Now, Another thing I can do is basically sort this in a descending order. How do I do that? We'll basically use the sort function, and we'll basically say that sorted according to created at, right? So this basically means I messed up. This is sort, not to sort, right? So what is this doing? This is basically sorting the data in a descending order. That means newest data first. So this will basically sort it from created at, which is the time that when the data was created. It will basically sort the newest data which was created first, right? That is what we're doing. That way, when we get the data, we only get the newest data at the top. Now, next is we need to send the response. So we're just gonna send that just like that. There we go. Now, next is getting a single user. This will get all of the users. What if you want a single user? So in that case, I'm gonna make another function. I can just copy paste, change the name just like that. And now I don't need any of these. I can just cut that. The logic for our single fetching user code will basically be, again, storing the user in some variable first. We'll basically use a query called user.find by ID. That is why we basically send ID as a route parameter. This ID is called route parameter. Or you can also say URL parameter, right? So that's why we sent ID as a route parameter, so we can basically get the ID from here by using find by ID and fetch that given data through its ID. So here I can basically check the request, since this is also request, right? The ID is inside the request. I can just do request.params. From that parameters, we only need ID, so I'm just gonna get the ID. So we're just doing request params ID. That will give me the ID of that given user. So here we need to account for what if the user does not exist, right? So in that case, what I'm going to do, so I'm just going to put a comment here, user doesn't exist. In that case, I'm just going to return a response saying response.status 404. That means not found, right? And here I'm just going to send the error saying user not found. Make sense? That means user does not exist. Now, if the user exists, that means it will not trigger this. So here I can simply write or send the user as a response. So next thing, since we have a try block, we obviously need a catch block. So I'm just going to catch the error here. And just basically do response.status. I'm going to send a status of 400 in case there are some errors. And we'll just send the error saying invalid user ID. Just like that. Now, this was for create, this was for get users, which basically returns all of the users. This was for a single user. Now is to update the user, right? So for that, what I'm going to do is, again, copy this because I don't want to write the syntax for function every single time. I'm just going to change the name, and that's pretty much it. So next is I need to cut all of this, right? So for update user, what I'm going to do is first I'm going to make a variable called updated, and we'll basically check, and we'll do user.find by ID and update. So this is a MongoDB query that you can basically run to update data in MongoDB database, right? So for that, we need to pass ID and the actual data. So in that case, what I need to do is do request.params.id. So this will basically get me the ID as I said before. Next is request.body. Now request.body can be something like, so this will have some kind of data like this. We basically need all of the values to basically update that in our database. The next thing I'm going to do is set new to true. Now, what does it do, you may ask? Basically, MongoDB by default sends the original value before the update, even if you update the value, right? Unless you specify saying new true, it will update the value with whatever you basically sent it to update, but it will still return the old value. if you do new true, it will send the updated value to the user. Next is run validators. So what does this do? Remember, we made validation checks in our values saying it is required, and if the minimum value of age is 0, email can only be unique. By default, MongoDB does not run all of those validation checks. Now, for it to run all of those validation checks, we basically need to specify saying run validators and set that to true. Next, I can just do updated. So in case the updated value does not exist, I'm just going to do, again, do the same thing here. We're going to send the 404 status saying user not found, right? And after that, after running that validation check, I'm just going to do response.json, send the JSON data, which is updated. Now in catch block, I'm just going to put the same thing, which I've copy pasted it from here. So I don't think there should be any issues with that. Next, and the last thing that we need is delete user, right? Now again, this is basically same thing. So I'm just going to change this to delete user, right? It will have all of the same code, but the only thing that will not have or not give is it will not have all of these, right? It will only have ID, so it will basically check the ID and delete according to ID. So I'm just going to paste that there, complete that parenthesis, and this, I'm going to change it to find by ID. I'm going to change it to find by ID and delete. So this is another MongoDB query that you can run to delete the values that you have. So after all of that, again, so I'm just going to say that this is user, and if user does not exist, we'll send the same response. Now this time we cannot send the user because it will make no sense. It's getting deleted, right? So instead of that, what I'm going to do is send a message saying user deleted, right? Just like that. So this will basically be a JSON response saying user deleted. So after all of that, our controllers should be ready to use. Now we haven't imported this into our router, so I'm just going to quickly do that. So this is extremely simple. I'm just going to do import. Now I'm going to use this syntax. The reason why I do that is because in this, we have basically exported individual functions, right? We don't have a default function like export default, right? In case of not having a default function, we need to specifically import them. So to specifically import them, we basically write all of our functions inside curly braces. So here I'm just going to do create user. I'm going to hit comma, say get users. I'm going to do get user. I'm also going to do update user. I'm also going to import delete user. So this is all of our functions, right? Now we need to specify from where we are importing it, obviously. So we'll do from, and we'll basically do controllers / user controller.js. So that will import all of that. Let me make it a little bit pretty. So I'm just going to do format document, and there we go. Now we have to import our user routes. Right now, user routes is now imported. Now we have to import this file right here. So I'm just going to do import user routes from routes / users.js. So that will import user routes, and also our localhost server is running at port 5000, right? So we have to change that to 5000. So I can just control click. I'm lazy, I know. Now one last thing that remains to do is import our database connection. Now you can see we haven't imported our database connection. So here I'm just going to do connect db from db.js and basically connect our database. So I'm just going to do connecting to database, and here we'll do connect db. Just like that, that will basically connect to our database. Now we should be ready to actually start testing our API. So for that, I want you to download Postman. So I'm just going to do postman.com. This will go to Postman official link, right? Now here, there are 3 options. So download for Windows, Mac, or Linux. I'm using Windows. So I'm just going to click on Windows. And here I'm going to download for Windows 64-bit, just like that. And this will start downloading, just like that. Now, now after it's now after it finishes downloading, I want you to click on the exe file, or if you're using Mac Linux, do according to that. Now this will open the exe file, just like that. And now you only need to go through the setup. Now here you want you to create an account, just log in with Google. And here to create a workspace, you need to go to workspace and click on create workspace. So let's say I'm just gonna name this workspace a CRUD API test. I'm gonna say that I'm just gonna put this into internal. That means only my team can access this workspace. And next, I don't need to put anything else here. After that, what I need to do is basically just create the workspace. Now this will create a workspace. So for team name, I'm just gonna do Codynn test, right? And I'm just gonna put API testing and enter email. I'm not gonna do that, so I'm just gonna click on confirm. Now here, click on send an API request, click on that. And now we can basically paste our URL, right? In our case, it's localhost 5000. So I'm just gonna go to our browser and type and do localhost, do 5000. So this is the thing. Let's say that's, I'm gonna copy that, paste that there. And now what's gonna do is, since the HTTP method is get, when I send, this will return API is running. The same thing that my browser returned. So that is how you can basically test our APIs. Now you might be thinking, why use Postman? Why not just directly use the server? Now in that case, you cannot send the post request. You can only do get request, right? What if you want to post request or delete, right? You can do all of that using Postman. Now here I need to do users. And when I do a post request, right, since it's a post request, as you can see, with Postman, you can make post requests, as I said. We'll basically change that to post request. So inside this, I have to send a body saying, let's say the body is, we need name, right? So we'll send a name. We'll send a name of, let's say, Codynn. We'll send a age of, let's say, 15. And we'll send a email saying Codynn at gmail.com. So that is what we will basically send. This will basically return me the data of the user that is created. So now if I show you the actual result, right, it stored the name as Codynn, age 25, it stored the email. Now it auto-generated the ID, as I told you. It also created at key that will basically store when the data was created, and also updated, right? So we can basically check that using the attributes that we basically talked about. Now let's try to make another user. So I'm gonna copy that. Let's say that is Codynn1. Age is about 55, I guess. I'm just gonna do Codynn1 at gmail.com. So let's try to send this. This will create another user, and this will send the user in the get response. Now what I'm going to do is send a get request on the users, right? Now according to our code, if we try to send a get response on the homepage of the users, it should return all of our users. So let's try to do that. This returned all of our users, that is one user and the second user that we have, right? Let's try to get a single value. Let's try to get the data of a single user. So let's say I want the Codynn1. I'm going to pass this here. I'm going to pass the ID here, send. This will return me the data of that specific user. So now let's try to update that user. So I'm just going to use the put attribute. And here I'm going to change the values to Codynn1. I'm going to change the email to Codynn123. Let's try if that works. It did work. It updated the thing. Let's try to get that user. right? It updated in there. Let's check in our database too if it actually performed all of the connections. I'm going to refresh the database. This created an Express CRUD database with users collection. Inside the document, it basically handled all of our CRUD operations. Let's try to delete this user now. So I'm going to go ahead and do the delete HTTP request. And this says user deleted. So let's get all of the users to see if the actual thing is deleted. Or you can also check the database. I'm gonna hit refresh. Let's go to users, and there we go. The user was deleted. And that is it for today's video, guys. I hope you liked the video and found the video helpful. If you did, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And yeah, till then, I'll see you guys in another video. See you in next episode. So in the last video, we basically made a CRUD API, which is, the CRUD REST API, which was 2 episodes, and we built, which had full CRUD methods, that is create, read, update, delete. Now in today's video, we're going to be deploying that API through Vercel. So if you're excited, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And without further ado, let's get started. So first, before we actually deploy it into Vercel, we actually basically need to do few changes in our code. So the first thing that we have to do, this is basically the project that we, made in previous 2 episodes, and here I need to do few changes as I said. The first thing I need to do is basically deploy our MongoDB URL into MongoDB Atlas. Now, MongoDB Atlas is basically a free deploying tool that, is given by MongoDB itself. And so let's do it. Open new tab and search MongoDB Atlas, right? Search for MongoDB Atlas and click on the first link. Now, after clicking on first link, what you want to do is basically sign in. Now, sign in through whatever Google account, or you can also make a new account right here if you want. Do whatever you want to do. I will basically catch you up after I sign in. So, see you. So after you log in, so it will log in. After you log in, it will say accept the privacy and policy, and it's TOS. So I'm just gonna hit I accept and hit submit. So after this, it will say site cannot be reached. Now if it does that, don't panic. It's just loading the actual MongoDB Atlas. So after a few seconds, you'll basically will be greeted with MongoDB, welcome to MongoDB Atlas, just like that. And after this, we can just skip this process by hitting skip personalization. So I'm just gonna hit on that, and you should be greeted with your cluster. So right now we haven't made a cluster. Cluster is basically your folder of MongoDB, but in cloud, right? So it will say deploy your cluster. So here you can basically choose to pay, or just if you're a cheap guy like me, just select the free one. So I'm just gonna do that, and I'm just gonna hit create deployment. As you can see, it's down right there. So after hitting create deployment, what you can do is basically create a cluster. So here by default, it will give you few stuff. Now I'm gonna blur the password out. Now here what you need to do is basically create database user. So after creating, you can basically hit choose a connection method, click on that. So you can choose with Compass, you can select the I have the Compass installed option, and you also want to copy this link, right? So I'm gonna hit copy. So after that, you're gonna hit done. So after that, your cluster should be right there. So if I go to database and hit clusters, you'll see your cluster right here. You can also select the browse collection option. What it does is basically goes to your cluster. Now you should be greeted with a familiar UI like you had with your MongoDB Atlas. Now after this, remember the link you copied? Go to our code. This is our project that we basically made in the previous episodes. Now you can just simply paste the URL that you copied right here, right? It will have your database username and your password. Don't share it to anybody. That is why we actually made a separate environment variable, right? Now we have to do a few stuff. So first thing you have to do is basically make a GitHub repository and basically push our project. Now, one thing I'm going to do, since our env, that is environment variable files, have sensitive data, that is our username and password, literally to our database, what we're going to do is basically make a file called gitignore, right? What you'll do is make a file named .gitignore. What it does is whatever files you put inside gitignore basically gets ignored by GitHub, right? So in this case, I want my .env and my node modules file not to be pushed. So I can just type .env and node modules, just like that. That should be okay. Now we have to initialize our GitHub repository. So we have this repository that I created. This is a private repository that I created. So what I'm going to do is basically hit there and now open my terminal. So you also need to have Git installed. If you don't have Git installed, we have a Git and GitHub tutorial in this channel. So if you want that, it will be linked in description box below. So after initializing Git repo, there is one more thing that we have to do before we push our changes. The first thing is I'm going to make a new file and just say Vercel.json. So this is a JSON file that Vercel needs to have some sort of instruction to how the actual, project gets deployed. So inside the actual thing, what you want to type, so we have to specify which version of Vercel you want to deploy from. So we'll use the latest version, that is version 2. So I'm just going to do that. Oops, not that. We need to use comma. So what this does is basically tells Vercel to use version 2, which basically enables serverless functions. And next, what I need to do is use the builds. Oops, not there. We have to use builds, just like that. And basically pass an array here, array of objects, saying the first parameter will be src. src is basically our source file. Now, source file in our case is the server.js. However, if you have a nested source file, that means the server.js, which is our main file, is inside another folder. You have to specify inside this, since it's the directory. In our case, we have it in our root folder. That means inside the building a REST API folder. We don't need to pass any other folder, so I can just do server.js. The next thing we have to pass is the use. So use key, we have to specify that we're using Vercel serverless function and basically do node in. So what this does is basically just tells Vercel to use node to basically run our project. Next thing what I need to do is specify the routes. So here I'll just do routes, make a key for routes, and this will also be array of objects. I forgot to put comma here. So what does this do? This basically tells the Vercel to whatever traffic that is coming, just actually send it into our server.js. How do we do that? We have to pass another key that's called dist, right? And we need to pass the server.js. This basically tells Vercel to whatever traffic is entering, just pass them in our server.js file. Now, after doing this much, we should be actually ready to push and deploy our services. So here what I need to do is I'm going to go back to my terminal, go back to our terminal, and we'll do git add, right? We'll do git add. It will add everything. If you do git add and select everything here, I'm going to do git commit. We need to commit our changes here. So I'm just going to do that. So I'm just going to do first commit, since this is our first commit. Next thing what I need to do is basically do git branch -m. I'll just do that. Now if I do git branch, you will see that we are in our main branch, and here I'm just going to do, or you can just copy paste this code, which basically means git remote add origin this GitHub. So this will basically add our remote repo to this GitHub repository. Now, in my case, I already did it. It will basically add it into your, I already had it. So that's why it's saying remote origin already exists, right? So here I need to do git push git pushed -u origin main. So after doing this, it should be pushed. If I refresh, our files should be here. So after making our GitHub repo, we should be actually ready to push or deploy our repository through Vercel. So here in Vercel, you can just sign up, right? If you don't have an account. If you already have an account, just log in. So I'm just going to log in really quick. Another thing I actually forgot to teach you guys is we also have to change the whitelisted IP address. By default, MongoDB only allows your IP address to hit the traffic. Now, in that case, what you can do is go to your MongoDB Atlas again and go to your left sidebar and go down to your database and network access. Click on that and you'll see an option with IP access list. So you can just click on that. It will basically show your IP address. Now here, click on edit and edit your access list entry to 0.0.0, oops, again, 0.0.0.0, 4 times 0, and / and 0. So this will basically allow any traffic or from any IP address to hit your MongoDB Atlas. So I'm just going to hit on confirm. Now it will take some time to make changes, so let it take its time. Now after it says status active, now you can close this, right? Or you can just go to a new tab. And when you log in, you should be greeted with something like this, right? After doing all of that, you can just click on add new and you can click on project. After we do that, it will basically show or basically tell you to log in through GitHub. So if you don't have a login, make sure you have a login. So after that, it will show all of your repositories, right? Here, what I need to do is basically go to our Express.js test deployment that we created. So I'm just going to import that. So after we import, what we need to do is basically, it will auto select everything for you. So in my case, we are using Express. So by default, automatically selected Express. So that's what we want it to do. So we don't have to change that. Next thing that we want to do is go to environment variables. Now this is something that it doesn't have. So we can basically just open our code, go to our environment variables, just copy everything just like that, and click on the key here and just paste it. It will just auto paste it for you just like that, right? Now after all of that, what you can do is just click on, after doing all of that, just click simply on deploy. Now it'll start to deploy your GitHub repository, right? Now after it's done deploying, it will say congratulations, your project is deployed. And you can basically scroll down and just click on continue to dashboard. Guys, another thing I forgot to do apparently was also basically have a database linked on the MongoDB URL. So what we need to do is go to our Vercel deployment, go to your deployment here, and just click on the settings, right? Click on the tree menu and click on settings. And also basically go to your environment variables and scroll down and basically change it here. Now I've already done it and click on save and it should be done. Now let's go ahead and basically, do CRUD operations here. So I'm just going to hit on post and hit on users. Now I already have a body right here, so I'm just going to post it. Now, if I go to users and do a get here, right, it should return me nothing because we don't have anything in our database, right? Now, I'm just going to append this inside here. So I'm just going to do post here. So when you do post on the homepage of users, right, it will basically create a user. So that is our code. So it will give a 201 response. That is the response that we sent from the backend. It says it created the name Codynn and all of these stuff. Now let's actually put another. So I'm just going to do Codynn123 and also put Codynn123 here. And we'll change the age to be like 26, whatever. We'll check that. It created the user successfully. So let's get the users, all of the users. There we go. It returned me 2 users. That is the exact amount of users that we have. And also basically do a put. So that is our update HTTP method. So here I'm gonna change. I want to actually update the Codynn 123 here. I'm gonna put the ID as a URL parameter, and in body I need to specify what I want to change. So let's say the username I want to do name 1234 and email 1234. So right now it's 123. I'm gonna change it to 1234. So let's go ahead and send it. There you go. It should return me that. So now if I go ahead and get all of that user, it should return me 1234. I can also check the value of the current value in the database by just getting that specific user by entering the ID on the URL parameter. That will return me the actual data of that given ID. Just like that, I change it to 1234 as you can see right here. So next is deleting it. I want to delete this, so let's do the delete method. Just delete this user. That will basically give me user deleted. And let's see if the actual thing is deleted. So I'm just going to do get users. That will return me all of the users. It should return me one user, and there we go. And that's it for today's video, guys. I hope you liked the video. If you did, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you have any questions regarding today, then just be sure to put them in the comments down below, and I'll do my best to answer every single one of them. And with that said, I'll see you guys in another video. Bye bye.